So I was just wondering how many emails that you got about Lyft.
I didn't count them.
Pardon me?
I didn't count them. I don't know.
Oh, so you don't know?
No.
Oh, because I was passing out flyers to all my riders, and I passed out well over 200, and all the people were taking screenshots too and sending them to their friends. So I was just wondering how many you got. Would
I
it have
have
been
to
at
ask
200?
my assistant. I don't know. I can't really say. I'd be guessing.
Yeah.
So I can't answer that question. Sorry. You
So-
can call me later. I'm in District 4.
So what's the phone number?
468-7251.
Okay, my name's Darlene.
Darlene, my name is Leonard Klein. Leonard, Leonard.
Uh-huh.
Klein, Clin. And you drive for Lyft?
Yes. Full time. I quit my warehouse job to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they doing
You know?
fine.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing fine. You know.
But I don't know if, I don't know what the resolutions are, but I guess they're going to talk about
Yeah,
what
we'll
it
talk
is?
about it.
Okay.
How are you?
Rob took the whole stack, so the pass anything out that getting picked out. So that's why I didn't send it back to you. I thought she just wanted me to tell you at the beginning of the day we met out at 18 o'clock. So I sent it back to her yesterday and I told her, look, a lot of stuff was supposed to go this week, but we know we're not getting it. I said, but yeah, I did send it all back. I mean, you know, but I mean, listen, and don't misunderstand. I don't have to call me if they're ready. That was what the comment was. So you don't have to call. You don't have to call them. Yeah, I mean, look, and the thing is, like, on the phone, it's not brings, he was on had a big stack. No, that's why Toledo took them from him. Took them in here. Not supposed to. Rob took them and told them that they could get them. And so he's making sure he told them, no, they don't pass it out in here. They're going to be removed. Yeah, something with it's something.
I would like to call a meeting to order. Do we have any special intentions? Do we have any special intentions? Okay. Councilman Impastato, you got the floor. You do too? I didn't see.
Like to keep the Abity family in our prayers. Alan Abity, longtime playground supervisor at Wentwood Playground and Wood Lake Playground, and a longtime, probably 30-plus year coach in the Kenner Recreation Department, who died suddenly last week. His family, all Kenner residents, University City and beyond. So we'd like to keep their family in our prayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilman DeFrancis.
Reverend Clay and the Clay family have been longtime residents of Kenner, even though Reverend Clay may not be living here at the moment. I would like to ask that you all keep the Clay family in your prayers. His mother-in-law is very ill, so I would ask that you please pray for Mrs. Morton, as well as his nephew, who died at a young age, and actually I believe he was 44. So if you could please keep the Clay family in your prayers as well, it would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Reyno, would you lead us in a prayer?
Let us bow our heads and remember that we are in the presence of the Lord. God our Father, eternal Creator and Lord of the universe, you have set the earth on its foundation, and all elements of nature obey your command. You give food to all flesh, cover the heavens with clouds, and provide rain to the earth. We humbly beseech you, Lord, Most High, to keep us safe from all dangers and to calm all the storms of life that threaten us, especially the attack of whirlwinds and tornadoes, the calamity and destruction of hurricanes, the din and danger of hailstorms, the striking of thunderbolts and lightning, and the devastation of floods and tidal waves. May we be secure in your loving protection, seek your will in all of our experiences, and serve you always with a grateful heart. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Councilman Impastato, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum this evening. Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Council Resolution Number B14550, please be advised that all cellular telephones, pagers, beepers, and other devices of this nature must be deactivated or silenced throughout the council meeting. Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend the agenda this evening to include item 16G, which is an ordinance amending the 2016-2017 operating budget to reallocate unused funds from the council office budget to the council chamber upgrade project account.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Klon, seconded by Councilman DeFrancis. To suspend the council rules. All members, please vote.
Motion
Aye.
passes 7-0 to suspend your rules.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Klon, seconded by Councilmember DeFrancis, to amend the agenda to include item 16G. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to object? Please come forward. Hearing none, all council members, please vote. Aye.
Councilman Carroll and Segura? Favor? Motion passes 7-0 to add item 16G. Under the consent agenda this evening, we have item 1, approval of minutes, the regular council meeting of May 18, 2017. Item 2 is approval of alcoholic beverage permit applications. We have none. Item 3 is approval of bingo and public gathering applications. We have none. Item 4 is correspondence, reports from the mayor, CAO, or department heads. Item 4A, at the request of the administration, a report from Mayor Zahn.
Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Council Chairman. Tonight, you have the Chateau Treatment Plant on the agenda. I would ask for your support on that. It's $2 million that I'm asking for you to support. It is one of the last things that we're getting to that we have to fulfill that compliance order. And as Councilman Klon and Councilman Wilmot and Councilman DeFrancis know, along with myself and the Chief of Police, that this is extremely important to the residents of Chateau and obviously to the rest of the city, but Chateau has to deal with the eyesore that's been there, and tearing that down also gets us in compliance. One other thing that we're dealing with is the citywide inventory. Just an update on that. When I first came into office, I said that we need to have a citywide inventory. I want to thank all the departments for all their input and how they've been complying with us. This is something we will do every year, as long as I'm here. This is something we will do to make sure we keep the taxpayers' assets intact, because we need a tracking system. And if you all grant me the privilege in the city of having General Services on July 1st start as a new department, they will be tasked with this to make sure that all the city assets are kept in track. Last thing is, obviously today is the start of hurricane season. We are doing a lot of things to prep for that. Just today I went to the parish press meeting that they had to notify the people of Jefferson Parish. About a week ago, some of you all joined me at the meeting of the City of Kenner, led by Doug Dote. We are keeping our constituents informed with numerous things. KTV, IT department has been working all together. We've released a video that actually started, I believe, today, and it will air quite often. We are predicted to have an above-average season. That's what the National Weather Service is predicting. That's an issue. We have to be aware of that. I think that we've had a pretty good prep ourselves, as all of us have worked together through text messages on the 2 last rainstorms that we've had, not this week, but within the last month or so, 2 last rainstorms. So I'd appreciate your cooperation. I'm sure I'll have it along with the Chief of Police to make sure that we accomplish that for our citizens. With that, I appreciate your support.
Yes, sir. That will conclude our consent agenda this evening. If I could get a motion and a second.
Motion? Aye.
Motion by Councilmember DeFrancis, second by Councilmember Wilmot on the consent agenda. All council members, please vote.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, motion passes 7-0 on your consent agenda this evening. Under the public appearance agenda, we have item 9, public hearings for final passage. Item 9A is a public hearing regarding summary ordinance number 12,241, an ordinance repealing Chapter 16 entitled Vehicles for Hire of the Kenner Code of Ordinances and replacing with Chapter 16 Vehicles for Hire per the ordinance contained herein.
Motion by Councilmember Segura, seconded by Councilmember Klon to open the public hearing. Council members, please vote. Aye.
Motion passes 7-0 to open your hearing.
Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the council on this matter?
Al Morella, 4260 East Loyola Drive, 5th District, 45 years. I support this ordinance, and I also want to commend the council at the May 4th meeting for passing that resolution to send up to Baton Rouge on Bill 527, because as of today, in the newspaper, it's been shelved. And with 1 week left in the session, I don't think it's going to make it. So they might have to wait till next year, and we'll have to do it again. Anyway, thanks again. Anybody got any comments, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. We have another speaker. Would you state your name, please?
Yes, I will.
Address?
Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is John Repstock. I'm here to speak against the currently proposed ordinance. When I was growing up, my father owned and operated drilling and workover rigs, and our office was right here in Kenner, Louisiana. The opportunity to work in the oil industry was always there for me. In February of last year, I lost my job in the oil field. After weighing my options, I was looking into going into unemployment and selling my vehicle. At the age of 60, it didn't seem like a likable option to me. Instead, I kept my vehicle and I signed up to drive for Lyft. After going through a rigorous nationwide background check, I was making money to support myself and my family. So many people in our community are using ride sharing and embracing it. Folks use it for their daily commutes to and from work, after home, or to get home, after a night out of drinking. Studies have shown substantial decreases in DWIs in communities where ride sharing is available. The proposed ordinance tonight would make it difficult for drivers like myself to drive from Kenner to other municipalities in the greater New Orleans area. It would create confusion for both passengers and drivers. I strongly urge you to support those innovative, safe, and reliable forms of transportation and vote no on the proposed ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, council members. My name is Nick Giuliano. I'm the Public Affairs Manager for Uber for the Southeast. I want to begin by thanking all of y'all for the formation of the subgroup of council members, the working group that took a lot of time over the last month and then a little bit before that to convene as a group to study the issue before y'all this evening very intently, to look at what other jurisdictions had done and what the right way to approach this issue in Kenner would be. I'm speaking tonight with a lot of caution towards the ordinance that's being brought forward tonight, because I think that after looking at the recommendations that have been made by members of the subcommittee and reviewing the draft tonight, there are a number of very significant material differences between what members of that subcommittee had settled upon and what is actually up to be voted on tonight. Some of those come in the form of amendments, some of which I've had an opportunity to have a look at, and others have had a chance to look at. Others, as I've been told, that we have not seen and that others have not seen. And there remains to be language in the draft ordinance that, as of meetings that have gone on over the past several months, has been agreed to be excluded in previous conversations by members of the council, but remains in there tonight. I'm referring most specifically to the requirement in the ordinance as drafted now to establish minimum rates between different locations in Kenner and the airport, and then between the city of New Orleans and the airport, MSY. Those rates are inconsistent with the rates that were brought forward in New Orleans, and if passed, would set up two different regulatory schemes with the two different jurisdictions saying two different sets of rates. Beyond the point of the airport travel to the city of New Orleans and MSY, the ordinance, again, as drafted now, sets a series of rates between the airport and different neighborhoods in Kenner. So if you're in one neighborhood in Kenner, you pay this rate to the airport. If you're in another location in Kenner, you pay a different rate to the airport, and so forth. Speaking on behalf of us as a transportation network company, there's not a jurisdiction in the United States that has a requirement like that, where there are rates that are prescribed from different locations within a jurisdiction to another location. Our business, the reason why you see so many rideshare drivers out tonight is that our business is based over time and distance and is really heavily vested in flexibility. And this portion of the ordinance, were it to be passed, would raise very serious questions about our business's ability to continue serving the airport and to continue serving this community. So I say with regard to that I appreciate the enormous amount of hard work that this body has spent on this issue. I recognize what a tedious issue this has been for this body and for many others. And in the spirit of avoiding many more meetings and many more work, I would respectfully request a deferral this evening so that the issues that remain in the ordinance can be corrected immediately following it, so that this does not become something that is passed and then immediately has to be addressed. Because as written right now, our company would not be able to fulfill the obligations here, and this ordinance would remain unique in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Good evening, council members. My name is Tim Alborg. I'm the Southeast Public Policy Manager for LIFT. We're really thankful for all the hard work and time that you guys have put into this legislation to give TNCs a framework to operate here in Kenner. We ask you to consider some additional amendments, however, on the current legislation to remove some of the barriers that would be put on Kenner drivers to get onto the LIFT platform. And, you know, really what these drivers want to do is they want to make supplemental income immediately. And many of these drivers are using that supplemental income earned on the LIFT platform to pay off bills, to pay off student loans, to save money for a family holiday. So this is really important to them. And as you know, LIFT partners with drivers who are independent contractors and who use their personal vehicles to provide transportation on a part-time basis in order to make this supplemental income. Over 75% of our drivers are on the platform less than 15 hours per week. And the LIFT platform has really become attractive to communities as a transportation option since many transit agencies are feeling constrained with their budgets. As you've seen in Jefferson Parish recently, for example, many of these local governments are considering alternative ways to offer mobility and to offer service in areas where, you know, fixed bus routes are just not possible or are underutilized. So in closing, we really respectfully ask that you consider amending the legislation to remove some of the burdensome requirements that are currently in there, and I've talked to many of you directly one-on-one about what those are. But just to, you know, cut to the chase, in its current form, we'd have to be opposed to this legislation. And so we stand ready, however, to work with you guys and partner with the city now and the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Daniel Zimmerman. I live at 5701 Durbridge Drive in New Orleans, 70131. Thank you for letting me speak to you all today. A quick question, because I've seen some conflicting statements. Is the requirement to have an occupational license still in the current draft that's going to be considered, or is it just a valid driver's license?
The occupational license is required.
Okay. I honestly think this just makes, and this is different from a CDL or a Class D license, correct? This is something that would be different than that?
Just,
Mr. Zimmerman, first off, you're asking a question, but you're going a different direction. You're talking occupational license and driver's license. You sure?
Well, I mean, the original ordinance that was specifically stated in the older ordinance that you were discussing is specifically worded Class D license, whereas I think this one actually says proper, valid license.
It says valid.
It says proper, but we're going to change to valid.
Change to valid, but are you still requiring an occupational license on top of that?
That's a different topic, but yes.
Okay. I just can't see how that's going to be something that's going to be good for the city. I don't see that you're going to have drivers who are, again, as they said, you know, people who drive less than 20 hours in a week are going to want to get an occupational license to that. It's going to significantly reduce the amount of drivers that are available to drive in the city if those two companies still try and if those two companies still choose to operate within the city of Kenner to begin with. So, and then that's going to be bad for the citizens of Kenner, because if there are less drivers that are available in the city, that means it's going to be surging or prime time, which is going to increase rates for the people in the city of Kenner. Plus, you also have the impact on whether or not, you know, people can pick up from the airport at this point or drop off, and that's going to, you know, significantly not just affect Kenner but the other regions. And I think it's a pretty bad idea, and I think it's going to negatively impact the people of the city of Kenner. And one thing that I do want to talk about, though, is I received this flyer on the way in. You know, if the side on the other side, I mean, I want taxi drivers to be able to make money just as well. You they say things that people aren't required to have a background check. I'm not opposed to background checks. These two companies aren't opposed to background checks. Nobody is saying no background checks. They might disagree on how the background checks are done, but I think it's disingenuous and dishonest to try and say that people are trying to get away without background checks. There's another thing here. This thing, suspects posing as Uber. Well, what does that have to do with anything? If somebody is pretending to be an Uber driver or a Lyft driver or whatever, and they're not actually are approved by the company, then that's irrelevant to the conversation. It would be like me complaining about somebody who was posing as taxi drivers to say that other taxi drivers shouldn't be able to make a living. So I really think that the rhetoric coming towards, I guess, my side of the issue from the other side should probably be toned down a little bit. Everybody wants to be able to make a fair amount of money. You can't have the same regulations on both sides. It's impossible, especially because I know in the ordinance it states, that we can only pick up people from requests made in the applications. That's not a limit that's placed on taxi cab drivers. There are many differences between what taxi cab drivers are allowed to do. They're asking more regulations to be placed on the companies and on the drivers themselves, but they're not willing to give up some of the things that they're willing to do, that they're able to do, like just pick up somebody just off the street or somebody on the airport without having a hail. So if you're going to have two different sets of operations as to how you're going to operate, as how you can pick up or drop off passengers, it's reasonable to suggest that some of the other ordinances or rules pertaining to operations for drivers should be different as well. So please take into consideration, if you have this, the occupational license language, I would strongly suggest removing that out, or at least deferring it to have more discussion, because it's going to be bad all around. People are going to be less likely to make money because it's not going to be worth it for them to get that license, and the citizens of Kenner are going to pay higher prices because of a lack of supply of drivers.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. The occupational license fee for a part-time driver would be about $50 for the whole year.
Mr. Zimmerman, too, before.
You want to comment?
You're referring to some flyer that was handed out. We haven't seen that. Could you pass it up here and let us look at it?
Sure. And keep it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Let me just say this, that the occupational license that Mr. Zimmerman is referring to is in our ordinance, and it will be about $50 a year for any part-time drivers. Everyone in the city of Kenner, every business that operates in our city is required to have an occupational license. If you have a plumber next door to you and they don't have an occupational license, the code enforcement will come in and shut him down. So everybody's got to have an occupational license that does business in the city of Kenner. Councilman Segura, you have anything?
Oh, no, that was all. I just wanted to see.
Okay, next.
Council members, my name is Zach Butterworth. I'm here on behalf of the New Orleans Aviation Board, and I want to thank you for your strong partnership. I think the last 9 months we've all worked together on this ordinance, and it's clear that we've come a long way and really narrowed the issues before us. I want to hit on one broad topic and one specific. First, the airport, while we may like it or not, relies on Uber. Lyft doesn't currently operate at the airport to the tune of about 1,000 pickups a day. That's about 40% of the people leaving in either a taxi or an Uber are using Uber. If that went away tomorrow, there's not enough taxis to take up that demand. And so I just caution you, as we attempt to now regulate this new business, which is Uber and Lyft, let's be careful not to run them out the airport, because there will be significant lines. And I know we've shared the data behind this with the council on numerous occasions, and that you all appreciate and have the same goals in making sure we have an airport that's world-class and that works for everyone. The second is an item that came up recently, and that's the fees charged from the airport to New Orleans. Specifically, the increase of the fee from $33 to $36, and for $15 for a third passenger in a car. So what that would do is essentially tax the traveling public to the tune of about $1 million a year the first year. Now, that tax isn't going to the airport. It's not going to Kenner even. It's not improving any of your roads. All it's doing is taking money out of the business people's and residents' pockets and putting them in Uber's pocket. But Uber's not asking for that, and everyone's asking for the current rate structure, which is $33, to stay the same. So I would just urge the members, if you do consider an amendment on this topic, to be consistent. Let's keep it at $33 for a ride from the airport to New Orleans. There's no need to change that. There's no need to create inconsistency, and there's no need to charge the traveling public an additional amount that only goes to line Uber's pockets. So I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you for your openness and discussion on this.
Mr. Butterworth, as you know, we met with you several times, like you said, over the last 9 months. The city of Kenner set up a committee. I was the chairman of the committee. Councilman Wilmot was on it, and Councilman Segura. As all the council members worked on this, Maria DeFrancis, Greg Carroll, Dominic, and Councilman Reno. We worked on it hard for 9 months. We think it's fair and reasonable for all involved, all the parties. We met with everyone more than one time, several times, and we spent a lot of time and work on it. And understand, Mr. Butterworth, that you would like the $36 reduced to $33, and we are considering that.
Thank you,
So
sir.
let it be known that we are considering that.
And just one possible misconception. There was a question about the City of New Orleans requirement on TNCs if we require them to have occupational licenses. We require the TNC to have an occupational license, which that is essentially sort of their tax ID number for New Orleans. We do not require individual drivers to have tax ID numbers, and we are concerned that that would limit the drivers at the airport if you choose to continue to require an occupational license. And I understand that everyone has to do that. But
Well, let me just say briefly that part-time drivers, they can make $33 or $36 now going from the airport to New Orleans. The occupational fee for the entire year will be $50 for those people. So I don't think that's an undue burden on somebody who wants to use our roads. They have to be repaired. To use our police department if they have an accident. We have to have a full-time police officer and full-time department that they're available 24 hours a day. Plus, if it's a serious accident or serious incident, then the fire department comes out. And we have to pay the fire department also. So we think it's fair that people use our city services, that they pay their fair share.
Councilman, I think that's completely reasonable. I think I just wanted to clear up if there was a question whether or not New Orleans required that as well.
Let me follow up that. Are you saying that the city of New Orleans does not require an occupational license for businesses operating in the city?
So the City of New Orleans requires occupational licenses for businesses. We do not require an occupational license. That's a,
Being told by their platform employer or whatever they want to call it, that they are independent business people. They're not employees. So if that's the case, I'm sure there's not a city in the country that does not have occupational licenses for independent businesses operating in their city.
sure. I think there are cities, though, that don't have occupational licenses for each individual TNC driver, but it's certainly up to the council's purview. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Butterworth.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Niran Gunasekara. I'm the Vice President of ASME Local 234 that represent metropolitan taxi drivers. Before I speak more, I just want to show you guys this flyer. I was the person who was distributing this flyer outside, but not inside. I was told by a police officer inside while I was seated here that you shouldn't be distributing flyers inside. I never did that. I respect the Constitution. I believe in America, and I think freedom of speech. I have that right to distribute a flyer outside. Now, I just want to say I support this ordinance that Kenner has worked for so long. Some of it, even I don't like it, but we have to have something in place. Uber and Lyft and their drivers, I welcome them to this city. They have every right to work as me, as a taxi driver, owner, operator. They have the right to work. But there's a question here. When I have to work, like if I come to the city of Kenner to get a CPNC, I got to get a permit, I got to do a drug test, I got to go for the background check, I got to have a health certificate, I got to have an occupation license, I got to have proof of insurance, and they inspect my car twice a year. Now, we are not asking that from Lyft and Uber. But here they come and they complain about an occupation license. If I had the power, I would ask them to have the same requirements as the taxi driver. They are doing the same job. They are taking people from point A to point B for a fare, for a fee. So if you're taking them for a fee, you are considered a commercial vehicle. There are many cab drivers that drive part-time. They are not complaining about occupation license. If you come to drive, you have to follow the rules and regulations. That's all I'm saying. There was a gentleman here from Lyft that claimed DUIs in America is down because Lyft and Uber came. All of a sudden, people in America start drinking and they're jumping into vehicles and they're not harming people. The state of California Highway Patrol Association and the state of Washington did a study. Yes, today in America, there are less DUIs than maybe 5 or 10 years ago. There's a reason behind that. That's because of education. You got to educate the people. You got to tell the people of, if you drink and drive, what harm you would do to people even you don't know. Or maybe even your brother or sister would be on the street and you could accidentally hit them. Cigarette smoking in America was a huge problem. How did they stop? When I first came to this country as an immigrant, everywhere I go, I seen Marlboro billboards. It's very cool, with a cowboy hat, denims, a cigarette in the hand. Today, people are not smoking because of education. They teach the kids.
Your time is up. Can you wrap things up? Your time is
Yes,
up.
I am in support of this ordinance, and I want you to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councilman Infestado, you got the floor.
Mr. Nurhan, can you come back, please? Just for a second. First of all, I'd like to compliment you on that flyer because I think you chose an excellent-looking young man to be on the cover of that flyer. And I don't know how good, you must be real good, because would you believe I'm wearing the same tie in that picture that I'm wearing today? I mean, what are the odds of that? What are the odds? And the same suit. You're pretty good.
Thank you.
But I'd like to address that for a second, because there's a number of false statements made in it that I think it's important for the public to understand. Your organization's accusation is that I'm in support of no background checks, right? That's your accusation, is it not?
I don't know about what organization you're talking, but the taxi union.
Let's go with the organization that
taxi
printed the
drivers.
flyer.
Right.
Okay. So that's the accusation, is that I'm against background checks, right?
Yeah, the fingerprinting national background.
No. Let's talk background checks. Background checks. Your accusation is that I am against background checks, correct?
Not necessarily. I don't want to say yes or no for that, because I want to mention.
Oh.
Okay, Uber has a background check, Lyft has a background check, cab drivers have a background check.
So since you can't say yes or no, you probably ought to reprint that flyer, wouldn't you think?
I don't know about where you're taking me with this question, but I could tell you
Well,
something.
I'm just seeking the truth, that's all. So what I want to know, I'd ask you, if you could, do another flyer that points people to Section 16-83 that has about 40, 50 some odd lines discussing the background checks that would be mandated by the TNCs. National background checks for all sorts of different crimes that go from top to bottom that have been nationally recognized as reliable background checks that I'm 100% in favor of. As far as the drug testing goes, since you've falsely accused me of being against drug testing, it's inaccurate, okay? What's provided in the legislation and what I've advocated for is random drug testing, which statistically, see, unfortunately, the way that I make decisions as a councilman here and cast my votes is based on data and analysis. And I'll continue to do that as long as I have the privilege of sitting in this chair and making those decisions. And the data and analysis nationwide suggests that random drug testing is far more effective than pre-employment drug testing in actually capturing people who are violating the rules and violating the law. So I've advocated for that random drug testing because it's going to get to people. And as you may recall, and I agree with you on the level playing field, and you know that because we've met for 9 months, haven't we, Mr. Nurhan?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
And I've told you that there's 2 ways to make the playing field equal. One way would be if we're willing to allow certain regulations, certain background checks and drug testing and whatnot to go for the TNCs, that we adopt the same regulations for the cabs, correct?
Right.
And I proposed that, did I not?
Yes, but you got to understand, you are opening the door for a wild, wild west theory. At this stage, we cannot open the door for the wild, wild west theory.
Okay.
We're going to get buried 6 feet.
I understand.
Because we don't have the billions of dollars, we don't have the high-profile lawyers, we don't have the high-profile lobbyists. We are just ourselves. I'm speaking today on behalf of the voiceless that cannot come here because they had to work. Because if they don't work, somebody is going hungry. Somebody's bill is not going to pay. I'm the voice of the voiceless. And I want to mention to you one thing. In January 11th, when the Uber driver who was robbing gas stations in Metro New Orleans, he robbed 3 gas stations. He was apprehended by Jefferson Parish.
I have some questions, Mr.
He
Nurhan.
went through the Uber
Mr. Nurhan,
background.
I have some questions that I'm looking to get answered, okay?
Right.
Because you brought this up, you brought the flyer up, okay?
Right.
When I asked you, could we make the regulations for cabs the same as for TNCs, you said to me, as you just said, y'all didn't want that, did you?
No,
You didn't.
because we have been living with regulations.
I understand.
They are coming into a market.
And you
to
mentioned
do the
lawyers.
same job.
You mentioned high-priced lawyers. Remember, you did have a high-priced lawyer who came and met with us. And, hold on, wait, you did. And when I asked you, I said, guys, can y'all provide us with the data that shows we need to adopt the same background checks that we're currently doing for cabs and taxis that is different than what we would allow the TNCs to do? And I asked, show me that the statistics show it's faulty, that it's not working, that it's not good enough, and nothing was ever provided, okay? Nothing. So I just want to make sure that as you're out, you know, discussing the issues, that you let people know I am for background checks. We're all for background checks. We're all for drug testing. And I think we're all for making it equal, just maybe in a little different way than you might prefer. So I just want to make sure my case was clear to you, Mr. Nurhan.
May I answer him? Do I have time to answer him, please?
I'm done.
You're done? Councilman Segura, you have the floor.
Yeah, if I can, Mr. Nurhan, please. First off, you know, I asked Mr. Zimmerman for this flyer that he was referencing because I was not aware of what he was referring to. And then after it was passed around, I was a little shocked by it because it does seem to be very much misleading because there's not a person on this council that hasn't had difference of opinions on this whole process, on what the process should be and what the steps should be and what the outcome should be. Are there going to be a flyer for all of us too?
I assure you, no.
Well, that's not fair then, because I'll be honest to say I'm one of the first that don't always agree with the way things went or the way things are going. But that doesn't mean that particularly any one of us are against background checks, against drug tests, or against this or against that. It's just the process that we have to go through to reach a compromise, and we reach compromises a lot. We have other issues that other people in the audience tonight are going to be addressing that we're trying to find a compromise to. So that doesn't mean that just because the way a discussion may go or a comment is made that any one of us are, according to that flyer, like that. I don't know anybody up here that's like that.
Right. So the issue has been Uber claims they have a first-class background check throughout America. If that's the case, then how come this guy who went and robbed these 3 gas stations in Jefferson Parish passed their background check? If he gave his fingerprints, I mean, he served 3 years in the state penitentiary. He was just released, and he was driving Uber and robbing. I seen a Uber commercial in TV which says driving and chilling. I think he was doing robbing too.
Okay. Well, I have to beg a little difference there on the sense that, yeah, when I first started on this project, I was very firm on wanting fingerprint background checks. But I also, on the other side, over time, had to step away from it because I truly understand that they're not really practical. Nobody gets a fingerprint background check. The NCIC computer run by the FBI does not allow us to access their computer for background checks by fingerprint. It is accessed in other avenues, whether it be names, social security numbers. Now, that doesn't mean I agree with it, but it doesn't mean as that flyer would indicate, that I'm a good or a bad guy because I walked away from it. I just trying to find the reasonable means to get a background check. And I did step away from the requesting fingerprint because in my understanding that was not going to be the best way to go because there is not a true way to get a fingerprint background check. Now, I'm just saying. So we're still trying, in this legislation, we're looking for that. Now, I don't know what Uber's specific means is, because if we pass this tonight, in there is words that's going to appoint our code inspection department to write the regulations and the things to go forth to set up the processing. But one of the things that was discussed is there are numerous nationwide companies that we know for employment purposes do background checks. Tons of companies hire them. I don't know which one Uber or Lyft may hire. They will have to satisfy to us that the one that they hire will meet our requirements and meet our acceptance. So that's all I can say right now is if we get this passed, then that's where we're going. Now, but wait, one other question, though, because this goes back to a different topic a second ago. The rates at the airport that are charged from the airport to New Orleans right now for taxis, what do y'all charge?
36 for 1 or 2 people. 3 or more is $15.
Is that consistent?
Yes. And even to Kenner or Lakeside Mall, we have fixed rates. What Uber does is they come and they undercut our prices by saying it's free market economy in America. What they are doing is they are passing all their expenses to their drivers. And these drivers, I feel sorry for them. They need to get organized. You need to go to Teamsters and get yourself a union.
Well, I'm not going that far just yet, but again, I'm trying to decipher what is the rate that you literally are charging, because there's been some discussion that even though the city of New Orleans set the rate at 33 and the city of Kenner has a 36, that you're not doing that.
Well, what happened there was when we first, in 2015, when New Orleans passed their ordinance, our fare was 33. Actually, we should have lobbied the city council and got it to 36. Uber has never agreed to these kind of terms anywhere in America, but they did in New Orleans, which is a victory for our lobbying. But people like me, we want to have an equal playing field. If what they are trying to do is they want to charge people $15, $20, that's fine. But their drivers are going to get $11 or $9, and what it's going to do to the taxi drivers, will be staying under the sun for 7, 8 hours for a trip. So what this city council has done has leveled the playing field. I thank every one of you for having the courage and putting this regulation in place, because you are giving everybody an equal footing there. Thank you, sir.
Okay, but you are sure that you're charging $36?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your comments. Maria? No? Okay. Next.
If I may, I wanted to respond to a question that was asked regarding occupational licenses, or we can let them go on ahead. But Councilmember Segura, I recall you mentioned a question about the requirement for occupational licenses and if there was another jurisdiction in the country that had them for TNC drivers. There is not. So TNCs, as in New Orleans, have an individual TNC permit. However, there's not a U.S. jurisdiction that has an individual occupational license on drivers.
And we don't either. We're going to utilize our existing code for independent businesses operating in the city that requires them to have a occupational license. These drivers, and you, as well as your Lyft friends, have emphatically told us over these 9, 10, 12 months, these drivers are not your employees. Is that correct?
Drivers are independent contractors.
They're independent contractors. As an independent contractor, a city of Kenner different ordinance, not this TNC ordinance, requires occupational licenses. That's where that's coming from.
Councilmember, as in New Orleans or Jefferson Parish or Gretna or any municipal ordinance or statute on the books in the United States right now governing transportation network companies, there is not one that stipulates that requirement. And again, that is because drivers have been understood to fall under a master occupational license that is held by the Transportation Network.
If you want to make them your employee, I understand that will happen. Well, that's your decision not to make them
That
your
has not been
employee.
the position that courts have taken or any other American jurisdiction has taken.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Darlene Swigert. I live at 1332 Mandeville Street in New Orleans, and I just started driving for Uber and Lyft last year. And I was able to quit my full-time warehouse job, but one thing I would like to say is that we do not make nearly as much as a taxi cab. I've talked to a taxi cab driver who's retired. He actually owns Melba's on Elysian Fields. And he was saying that they have the capability of making like $1,000 a day. So anyway, we do not make nearly as much as they do. And I think too, like all the riders, I've been giving papers out to all the riders about what's been going on, the discussion. And the people say that they should be able to make a choice, like if they want to take a taxi or if they want to do rideshare. And also, like, the poorer sector of the community can now afford to get a ride somewhere. They don't have to take their kids to wait for a bus for a while. They can get a cheap ride. Another thing, too, is that I think it would be more fair if the taxi companies had to get apps, because then their rides would all be the same. Because the riders have told me that the taxis all charge different amounts. They pretend their meter doesn't work, and they charge them cash a lot of times, but they say it's never the same amount, and they charge $15 for each additional person. We cannot do what taxis do. We can't come up here and sit where the taxis do. We can't pick up somebody who's hailing a cab. Let's see, what's the other thing? And then, if we, as Lyft, we can't go to the airport, why should we have to pay an occupational license? And the other thing is, too, when there's extra events in the city, there seems to be taxi cabs. This is what the riders have told me. There seems to be taxi cabs coming in from all over. They can't speak English, they don't know where they're going, and they charge a lot of money. They don't seem to understand the apps or, the directions. They can't, and they drive the people real far around and charge a lot of money. So I think we should let the people have a fair ride share that they can afford.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Mike Wetzel, 3311 East Catahoula Court in Kenner. I own Big Easy Limos down the street. And, this is a joke of some of the stuff I'm listening to here. First of all, they are independent contractors, Uber drivers. They will tell you they're not going to, they don't provide any kind of insurance, any kind of taxation. They get 1099s. So they're saying, Uber's saying that they're not, they just shouldn't have to pay occupational license. Sure they should. They're independent business people. They should have tax ID numbers, and they should have everything that we have. I, as a limo company, also deal with Uber, which is Uber Black. Uber Black is reserved for limousine companies only. We can only use black sedans, up-to-date sedans, not pickup trucks that I've seen people being picked up in, Volkswagen Bugs, whatever they can do. Only thing I like to say, and for the taxi cab people as well, because they've been here a lot longer than these people have, Uber, not the individual drivers, you know. But the taxi cab people have to pay all these fees to pick up one guy at the airport. They're not paying anything. I pay $600 and $700 to $800 per car per month in insurance. They got State Farm at $80. Is that fair? I can't live it. I'm about to close. You know it yourself, Mr. Segura. We had a meeting up there. A lot of businesses in this business, this limo business, are about to close. We're about to give up because there's so many people like Uber. And Uber is being sued by everybody in every municipality in the United States. You can read it anywhere you want to go, and they seem to work under the radar. When we first started Uber here, we hired lawyers. When we tried to show the City Council of New Orleans that this wasn't a good idea, because what they're doing is they wanted to come in with Uber Black, which is us. That way it was taxed. We produce money. My people pay taxes, the whole circle. But the real underlying issue was that they wanted to come in with Uber X, and they were going to no matter what. They started Uber X on the road before they even got approval. Uber X now is everywhere. Any Tom, Dick, and Harry can drive a car, from a 90-year-old lady to an 18-year-old kid, as long as they got an insurance card and a car. But all I'm saying is, I don't care. If the city needs taxes, I'm willing to pay my share. This is a great city, probably the best city in the United States. I've been all over this world, and I've been all over this country. And, you know, I sleep good at night knowing the police department and our council people are doing the right thing to keep us safe. But I want them to pay the same as I'm paying. So I can stay in business, and my 18 people that I employ can have a job. But again, I'm very passionate about my business, but they have to understand that they are contract drivers, and they're independent companies, and they need to pay every tax that an independent company is supposed to pay. And it's only fair. If not, the taxi cabs are going to leave too, because they can't make it.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
How y'all doing? I'm David Bell. I come to speak on behalf of the taxi drivers. I just wanted to get something clear. With the drivers, on our cabs, we have everything posted as far as our flat rates from the airport to the hotels. It's no confusion with that. Everything is posted. We use our meters in the city for the short runs, but all the flat runs are posted on the cabs, and most cab drivers have it in the car also. So we have no issues with that. We all required to have credit cards, so it's no issues with that, and we all required to have cameras in our cab, so it's no issues with that. It's a lot. We have all the safeties. With the driver, what we want is an even playing field. We just want the ability, because we have to face reality. They are doing the exact same job we are doing. It's no different. They're just doing it on the internet only. So we are doing the exact same job, so we should have to have the same requirements to do the job. So that's why we would want them to be safe and have a background check, a thorough background check, drug test, to make sure the roads are safe. So that's mainly what we want. If they're going to be involved doing the same business, they need to have the same requirements as the taxi drivers. So that's all we ask, for an even playing field. That's my comment for tonight.
Thank you for your comments.
All right, have a good night.
Oh, Councilman Stottle, you got the floor.
Mr. Bell, is it?
Yes, Bell.
Mr. Bell, you're a licensed Kenner cab driver?
I'm in Orleans Parish.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in
How often do you have to have your background check in Orleans?
Every 2 years.
Okay.
Every 2 years, we have to renew our permits.
Okay.
And we have to have a drug test, and we have to have a federal background check.
And
we have to keep our defense license for driving.
you're aware that the background check in Kenner is only done initially, right?
Okay,
Yeah. As long with the drug test initially. So if somebody's driven for 20 years as a taxi driver, they may not have had to have a background check or a drug test over the course of that 20 years. Are you aware of that?
over the 20 years?
Yeah.
So they're not required
As long as they did it
to renew
first.
their permit?
Right.
They don't have to renew their permit every 2 years?
Probably. They only got a couple of them.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Do
So-
they have to renew their permit every 2 years?
Would you want to have, I guess my question is, would you want to have, if the cab drivers don't have to have the same drug testing and background checks at the same frequency as TNCs, would you agree that then the cab drivers should have to do it as frequently and as rigorously as the TNCs?
Yeah, let's see who else gets it there.
Every time we renew our permit, which is every 2 years, that automatically
Okay.
you got to get a background check when you renew your permit.
All right. All right, thank you. I'm
No
sorry.
problem.
Thank you, Councilman.
Ain't that all?
Thank you for your comment.
All right.
Mr. Brown?
Richard Brown, 8 Sessions Lane in Kenner. I'll try to be brief because I've discussed this with some of you, and I appeared at the committee meeting Monday and made some of these same points to the 4 of you who were there. And I'm pleased to see that you are proposing some amendments to probably 2 out of the 3 major objections that I had at the committee meeting. One regarding the driver's licenses. I like the wording you're proposing much better. You're removing, as I understand it, the provision that would prevent people from being able to drive if they're even charged with a misdemeanor. The one provision you still have in here that I really take exception to, and let me preface this by saying I'm opposed to the ordinance in its current form for various reasons, but these are the major objections. And the major one that's left is the requirement of an occupational permit. I just don't think it is right to require part-time drivers to have an occupational license. No, I said permit, I meant license. An occupational license, as someone who's in business would have to have. And I was thinking that was not required in other parts of the country. We were told at the committee meeting New Orleans required it. I think the record has been corrected, and we know now that New Orleans does not require it of the drivers. Of the companies, yes, but not of the drivers. You know, I just don't think that's something we should do. And that really is all I want to say at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown,
Councilman
I would just want to
Gillen?
clarify that the comment is that this legislation is saying independent business people, whether it be a driver, as we said, plumbers, lawyers, whoever, they go to work for 1 hour in our city, they have to have an occupational license. It's not any different than any profession. These independent contractors for both of these 2 TNCs that are here have made it clear that these are independent contractors for them. If you were a contractor and you're building a house or a building and you go hire subs, they're going to have their own occupational license because it's required, and I beg the difference from the comment about across the country, they're not required, but I'm pretty sure in this region, every municipality, parish requires an occupational license for a business operating in their jurisdiction. Doesn't matter if it's for 1 hour or 20 hours or 1,000 hours. It's required. Our code enforcement department, as diligent as they are, have gone after people that I'm friends with who are operating out of their house, small businesses, and given them notices they must go get their license. Why should they be held to a different standard than others who are operating a small business? So the comment that you made is that it's not required in New Orleans. I don't think that that's the statement. The statement is it may not be required in New Orleans TNC legislation, but there are New Orleans codes that require occupational licenses. And I guarantee you they do get them for businesses operating in the city of New Orleans.
My concern with this legislation is that this legislation specifically states that they shall have an occupational license. It's separate language in here. When Kenner and other cities adopted the occupational license provisions, I don't think they anticipated part-time people like this having to have one. I don't think we're going to require them of kids setting up lemonade stands or a neighborhood teenager who cuts an occasional yard for some extra money. I just don't think it's appropriate to require it of these drivers. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Segur, but I just don't think it's appropriate to require it.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
My name is Byron Kohotek. I operate a company called Acadia Coach Lines. I live at 3310 Grand Lake Boulevard. My company is located at 2433 Connecticut Avenue in Kenner. When this ordinance first came to our attention, I really wasn't sure that we were included in the ordinance. But the more I listen to this and get into it, I'm not sure that we're excluded. We don't do business with the public at all. All we do is pick up airline crews at the airport, bring them to their hotel, and the next day we pick them back up and bring them to the airport. So we don't do business with the public, and we only do business with airline employees. When we hire a driver, we do a background check in our office to the extent of calling their previous employers, checking out with them. And when we have a candidate that looks pretty good, we send the information to our insurance company. They do a background check, do an MVR, and they call us back and tell us whether this person is acceptable or not. If they're acceptable, we send them for a pre-employment drug screen and physical, and we also do that physical at least once a year. And in some cases, they might even do it every 6 months. And we also do random drug screens. Our equipment, we have a DOT inspection that we do ourselves. The Aviation Board does a yearly inspection of the vehicles. Our insurance company sends a person, and I guess 2 or 3 times a year, to inspect our equipment, our drivers' files, their records, and also our accident reports. So we are definitely inspected, regulated, and our insurance company won't even let us hire a driver that has less than 2 years of passenger carrying experience. Any fees that are added to us, we can't pass it on to our customers. We have contracts with 11 major airlines, and most of these contracts have a 3-year term, and there's no way that we can get another nickel out of them for 3 years. And it's very competitive. They have other companies that bid on it. At the present time, we do about 120 trips per day with just airline crews. And I'm just not sure whether we're included in this or not. So if somebody can give me some idea.
Well, we can handle that after the meeting. We have to consult with our city attorney.
Very good.
No, we don't.
Thank you.
No, we don't.
Councilman Estrada, you got the...
As I read what is being proposed, it does not change the limousine and shuttle regulations from what they are currently. So unless I'm misreading it, colleagues, I think I can state with comfort my interpretation. Nothing in here, in what is proposed here, would change the current system as you're currently operating under for you.
Well, the city of Kenner has determined that we do not need CPNCs from the city of Kenner for the operation that we have.
Well, what I'm saying is this would not change the current scheme you're operating under,
Okay.
if that answers your question.
Can we ask our city attorney to comment on that?
You can just say yes.
I'll find the right button and turn it on in a second. The only difference, the only change is that in our current system would be the driving permit But if they're not operating under a CPNC here, then there would be no need for a driver permit.
So they would be excluded?
There would be no change in their regulation.
No change in their regulations? Okay, I hope that answers
What'd he
your
say?
question.
What he
No
said.
change.
Sounded better when he said it.
All right, seeing no one else wishing to speak, I just want to make a few comments and try not to be too repetitive. The entire council, the mayor's office, all the city employees have worked very hard on this ordinance that is set to be heard today. We had a committee formed of 3 councilmen because we can't have more than 3 councilmen meet at one time. So we met with all the various parties, the mayor's office, other councilmen, lay people, all the parties involved. We spent a lot of time on it. And I think what we have now is a good ordinance for everyone, for the taxi cab drivers, for the TNC drivers, for the city of Kenner, and all of its citizens. So the TNCs will collect the information on their drivers, the driver's license and all the other information that they need to collect to make sure that they have competent drivers to drive. They will do random drug sampling, as Councilman Impostata said. That is a more effective way than having a drug test on a given date and a given time when somebody can say, and I'm not accusing anybody of this, but they may not do anything for 2 or 3 days, or if it stays in your system for a month, they may not do anything for a month. If it's random, they have to go then, or they will suffer the consequences. Also, the occupational license, it's about $50, and that's not a lot to pay for an entire year, when some of your fares could be as much as $50 or more. So you may only have to have one fare to pay the $50. And the TNC companies have said they're not employees, they're independent contractors. So they are separate business from the TNCs as far as the TNCs are saying. Also, we have provisions in there that protects disabled people. There's a federal law, Americans with Disabilities Act, that requires entities like municipalities, businesses, comply with their law. And the taxi cabs already comply with it, that they have vehicles suitable to pick up and deliver disabled people. You know, some of the disabled people have the scooters that they have to get in and out of the vehicles. And that's one thing we're going to require, that the TNCs have, make a contract with someone else to provide those services if they can't provide them with their drivers. We don't want to hold the city of Kenner out for any penalties or attorney's fees for violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's a limited amount of vehicles, it's 3 vehicles. So we think that all of the ordinance and the provisions therein are fair and reasonable. The city of Kenner will get pick up 50 cents per pickup in the city of Kenner. That's certainly not a huge burden on anyone for using our streets, our police department, our fire department, and other city services. Like I said, the drug tests and the background checks will be required, same as it is, very similar to the taxi cabs. Also, you know, all the council people and the mayor's office and everybody that's been working hard on this, safety is very important. There's not 1 but 3 councilmen on the city of Kenner that are attorneys, and certainly we want to comply with the law. We want to make sure everyone that's picked up or delivered in the city of Kenner with a competent, experienced driver, that we don't want an increased risk of accidents and other things that might happen. So we're trying to do everything we can do to protect the public for everyone. I think that's all the comments I have. Does that, Councilman Segura, you have any comments?
Well, I think we're,
Or Councilman Impostado, I'm sorry.
Public hearing's still open, you know.
we're still in the public hearing. Once you close that, then...
Okay, would we vote, can we vote to close the public
Close-
hearing?
Yes.
Yes, if I could get a motion by Councilman Segura, second by Councilmember Klein, to close our public hearing this evening. All council members in favor. Motion passes 7-0 to close your hearing. Now you are on approval, which is a motion by Councilman Segura, second by Councilmember Klein for approval. And now council members can discuss the issue.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilman Segura?
Yes,
You have the floor.
thank you. As you, first off, it probably heard, so it's going to be a little repetitive, but I'll just go through it because it has taken a very long time to get to this point. At least in my part, I know early part of last year, realizing that the T&Cs were operating in the city of Kenner, and as such, did not have a permit through the city of Kenner to operate, that in effect made them operating illegally. So as not to cause undue charges against their drivers, during the administration, when I was acting mayor, I started with my staff to work on draft legislation to bring the TNCs into a legal status, into an accepted status to work and operate in the city. We started meeting with the representatives from TNCs. We met with the taxi industries in various parties. Over the time, Councilman Impostado, who on his own had taken the lead and started his own work product, joined with us, and we worked together and spent many of hours sitting down with everybody, going through every word, sentence, paragraph, to get to the point to where we hoped we could, as I said earlier, reach a compromise to allow the TNCs to operate in a fashion that allows their business model to go forth, but still meet some of the terms that we as a council are obligated to do, and that is regulate a vehicle for hire industry and ensure that it is safe and reasonably fair for the public using it, because you don't want to get in a vehicle for hire, as we've heard, and have mixed ideas of what the rates are or what the rules are. So that is why there are rules and rates set in place for taxis in the other parts of the industry, limos and shuttles. So bringing the TNCs into the vehicle for hire chapter of our codes, chapter 16, was the intent to make it legal and then get it into a compliance to make it reasonably fair for all parties to operate. As we've heard, and every member of this council has contributed many, many hours of sitting and listening, talking, presenting their own ideas, presenting their beliefs, and we've finally come to this point to where we have a document that we feel has reached that compromise to put forth for us to vote on. Is it going to be 100% happy for all parties? No. I'll be honest to tell you that. But then again, if anybody has ever been in some form of legal action, litigation, and you have, nothing I'm picking on lawyers, but if you have several lawyers together and you put them in a room, you're never going to get an agreement. You're going to come out with something that's going to make everybody go, okay, I'm glad that's over, now let's move forward. It'll settle some issues, but it still may leave some issues open, but at least everybody can feel, okay, I got my just due on the issue. So where we're at tonight is that point in time. We have a document that has been put out. I'm sorry, the fan's not working? Oh, was that? Okay. The document that we have has been contributed by input from everybody up here. We're going to also have some amendments that we will present, and those amendments came about for the purpose of ensuring that the language is something that everybody can live with. Natalie, when do we do the amendments?
I'm not sure, sir. I've received them,
Okay.
but I'm not sure
Well,
who's going to...
I'm ready to move on them, that's my point. I just didn't,
You ready for me to read them in the record, and would you like to do them individually in
well, I
global?
understand I have a request from Councilman Impastato.
I'm going to move for division of the question if
Yes.
it's done in globo. So it's taken separately.
The amendments would like to be taken individually, each amendment?
That's fine. We're going to vote on the ordinance first, huh? Or not? No, we'll vote on the amendment? Okay, right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Are you asking for a deferral?
all right. If you want to do them in globo,
No, no, no.
after
No,
that,
separately.
I'm just going to move for them to be divided.
Yeah.
To a division of the question.
Okay.
Okay. That's where I was headed, because I knew we had a
Not my amendment.
page of amendments with 4 or 5, but I understand you had a
Oh, yeah,
desire
you
to
wanna do
take
mine
them
first?
separately.
Let the other councilmen speak first before we go separate them, because we're not finished the council members making comments, right?
And I don't have a problem, but I would think that procedurally, we would put the amendments in place so that when we talk, we're talking on what we're going to finally vote on.
Okay, well,
Is that okay?
that's fine. That's fine, we can do that. Let's vote on. Right,
That's fine.
correct,
Yes.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anybody's got any questions with the procedure. No, nobody does. Okay. All right.
Okay. Tonight, I've received from the city attorney some amendments. The first amendment would be under section 16-44, subsection C2. We would add the word "or" at the end of that section.
You expect us to motion on?
Yes, I will need a motion and a second on each amendment as I read them into the record. That would be your first amendment.
Okay,
So amendment
Councilman
number...
Segura moves on it, and I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion on this amendment? Hearing no
Seeing none.
discussion on that first amendment.
Council members, please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. The next amendment would be under the same section, 16-44, subsection, section 16-81, under, excuse me, ma'am?
You could make the motion now.
Okay, absolutely. It's section, does everybody have a copy of this amendment that was sent out to everyone that I'm reading from?
I do.
From the city attorney's office?
Yeah, it was sent
Okay.
out.
Okay, great. Under section 16-81, number 3, it will read, possess the valid driver's license.
Okay,
Okay? Okay, go ahead.
is it the same? Do you have more than one section in your amendment, or just a valid driver's license?
Yes, Councilman Reno has also submitted an amendment for this same section. His amendment would be a valid Louisiana driver's license.
I'm adding the word Louisiana behind valid. And also in number 4, which is right below that, I'm adding the word Louisiana before the word registration.
Okay. The legal department, Mr. Ed Rapier, would like to speak, if you would.
You have, right now, you should be on.
You're on. Are you on?
Right now, you have one motion for an amendment, which is to add the word valid. You either have to have an amendment, a motion to amend the amendment, or you take each amendment individually. So you
Okay.
can't combine the two without such a motion.
Okay. You want to speak before we vote?
Okay, so the First Amendment was, that the clerk read into the record, was under 3. It would read, possess valid driver's license. Do I have a motion and a second for that First Amendment that I read into the record?
I second it.
So I have a motion by Councilmember Segura, I have a second by Councilmember Klein to amend item 3 to read valid driver's license. Any discussion on that amendment? Councilmember DeFrances.
Thank you. Mr. Rapier, I apologize, but you and I had a long discussion on that very, very question in your office the other day, and I thought what came out of that discussion was important because it directly impacts the word valid and what effect it has, and whether or not the word Louisiana changes, by adding Louisiana would change anything. Could you go over some of the points we talked about? Do you understand my point?
I think I do.
Okay, good. If not, I'll make sure we get back to the,
The word valid would mean that you would have to have a driver's license that is valid to use in the state of Louisiana for the purpose for which you are doing.
right. But there's
so that-
more to it.
No, and so, for example, if you were to have a Mississippi license, that license would have to be similar to or equivalent to whichever license you would need to operate in the state of Louisiana to operate as a TNC driver.
Okay, so let me ask a question just to clarify a couple of points. I know that there are people who have differing opinions, and I'm not going to ask you to, and I'm not going to argue the point whether one is right or wrong, but just simply state that there are many who believe that according to Louisiana law, you must have a chauffeur's license to operate a TNC. Am I correct?
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
not saying that necessarily everybody's going to agree with that, but is that not so?
That's correct.
Okay, so then, so if I come in from the state of Tennessee or South Carolina or whatever, and I want to operate, work to drive an Uber or Lyft or TNC in other words, and Louisiana law says I have to have, and it says I have to have a valid license, even if it doesn't specify Louisiana, I would still then have to meet the requirements of Louisiana, which would mean then I would have to have a chauffeur's license from that state. Is that correct?
You would have to have a license that would be equivalent to the license
Exactly.
required in the state of Louisiana.
Exactly. And if that's chauffeur or whatever else it might be, I'm not, even if it's something other than that, those requirements would have to be met. Am I correct?
That is correct.
So adding the word Louisiana really isn't going to change it one way or the other, is it? Because the requirements are still that we have to meet the regulations of the state of Louisiana. Am I correct?
The only thing that would change is that you would limit it to people who have Louisiana
I
license.
understand that, but I'm not talking about whether I'd limit it only to those people, but what I am saying is that the people that would come in with that valid license would still have to meet all the requirements of anyone who had a Louisiana license.
That's correct.
Okay, I wanted to put that on the record, that either way, the requirements are going to be the same,
That's
other
an-
than
That's an,
you have Louisiana on your license.
that's an enforcement issue, but yes, that is correct.
Thank you for making that clear, because I think there's a lot of ambiguity. I think there are a lot of people who aren't sure exactly what that meant, and I thought it was absolutely imperative to put it on the record. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Councilman Reno, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. This question is going to be for Chief Glazer. Would it be easier for because you're going to be the one that's going to be enforcing as far as a license if they're pulled over, would it be easier for your men to determine whether it says Louisiana, valid Louisiana, then they know they're looking for a Louisiana license? Because I'm sure your officers don't know what every license in every other state requires, or whether it's equal to a Louisiana, so just,
The class of license?
yes.
No, we wouldn't know offhand.
So it would make your job a lot easier if you pull somebody over to see that they have a Louisiana license, and because the state ordinance requires, state law requires that they have to have a D chauffeur's license, it will make it easier for your officers to do their job.
Not necessarily. I mean, you got bus drivers, you got over-the-road truckers, all have different state licenses with different endorsements on them. So, I mean, there's a lot of things. We're not going to pull anybody over just to check a license. You have to be stopped for something else first.
Right.
So, and then you get into, what the person's doing, and then you go from there.
Okay. So
But
it
we
wouldn't
do it every day now, so
But
it's not,
it wouldn't make it any easier for your officers if they saw that it was a Louisiana license and you knew that that for-hire driver needed a Class D or a chauffeur's license.
I mean, if it's a Louisiana license, maybe just for quickness of it, but other than that, we deal with it every day. Every state has a different class of license that we have to, when we stop, the officer.
Okay.
So
That's
it's-
my only
I mean,
question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief.
Councilman Wilmot, you got the floor.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the driver's license. If you had used the word valid driver's license, I mean, what difference does that make? If you add Louisiana in there, it's very restrictive. That's what I believe, and that's what I understand. If Nick Juliana, if you can come up, and I just wanted to ask you a question on this issue. Dealing with Uber, the company that you work for, would they have a problem if it had just Louisiana driver's license?
So the states have dealt with this issue a little bit differently, and jurisdictions within Louisiana have dealt with the question of what the type of driver's license, not actually the type of driver's license, but who the issuer of the driver's license to be valid has been. In Orleans Parish, there's a requirement for a Louisiana driver's license, just as a Louisiana driver's license. However, in Jefferson Parish, the parish in which we sit right now, the requirement is for, it says valid Louisiana driver's license, but then the ordinance goes on to state that or a license belonging to another state of the union. So accordingly, and looking at this from a policy perspective, if you've got the situation of somebody from Georgia, where I'm from, or from Alabama or Mississippi, who's maybe a college student who's in the area going to any number of the schools here, say they're at Loyola, and they want to be an Uber driver in their part-time, well, they probably have their original state license issued to them. So putting Louisiana in there means that they're not going to be able to have the opportunity to earn money on the platform. So it would be denying them that ability. I guess the broader concern is that Jefferson Parish has dealt with this issue and has opened it up. And so accordingly, the ordinance here in Kenner would be more restrictive than what the parish we're sitting in has chosen to do.
So if you have somebody that's from out of state, they're a student here, they have an out-of-state driver's license, Mississippi, for example, and then they come to school here and they want to be an Uber driver, they would be prohibited from driving. Is that correct?
That's how I would read that language, yes.
So valid driver's license would be preferred to you as opposed to saying valid Louisiana license?
Yes, sir. We believe that people who live in other states and maybe are here for a temporary period of time, if they want to have the opportunity to drive and earn money, then that's one thing that we stand by with our platform, and one reason why it's so popular.
So if we have like an event, a large event such as the Super Bowl, sometimes we do host the Super Bowl, when we need a lot of drivers, those drivers they'd be prevented from driving.
That's right, yes. Although I wouldn't say that there'd be a ton of people coming in from other states, but I think with regard to people who are living here and maybe have a different driver's license, that would be an opportunity for them.
So if they have the restriction of Louisiana license, it is a problem. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman DeFrancis, you have the floor.
I have a question, and our council president was nice enough to let me ask the question of our attorney because of this issue that was just raised. And Mr. Rapier, if you wouldn't mind, I had a phone call that I received earlier who dealt with this issue of college students. And the person on the other end actually made a suggestion in case we did want to say, we didn't want just the word valid, but we wanted a valid Louisiana license to be approved. And so the discussion was there a way that we could include college students? And this is what was being proposed. So I'm asking you, would this be viable, and would it answer some of the, the questions that arose about how this would impact this legislation? And the suggestion was made that you would have a Louisiana license, or if you were a student, you would have to have a student ID with your out-of-state license that was comparable to the Louisiana license. So the student ID would be the one way you could still retain the license you have from out of state, and at the same time still have to meet all the requirements that Louisiana has in place. Do you understand what the suggestion was?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm not saying we should or shouldn't. I just thought it was necessary, since this was a call I did receive and was asked to at least mention it at the council meeting. I thought it was only fair to do so, since this discussion was, just ensued. If you could just mention whether that would be a possibility, whether it would be too cumbersome, whether there are other alternatives, or maybe just to stick with valid, whatever, understanding that, again, what we spoke about before, that anyone with an out-of-state license would still have to meet all our requirements. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. I hope it does.
Your driving requirements also require that a driver be 21
Right.
years of age or
course.
older. So a recent transplant to the city as a college student at 18 years old would not be able to
No, of
qualify
course not.
as a driver. Certainly, the less regulation that you put in there makes your enforcement easier. So if the question is a valid driver's license as opposed to a valid driver's license and/or student ID card, it certainly would make it an easier enforcement issue, I would believe, to leave it as a valid driver's license.
Okay, so, but if this council, and I can't speak for anybody else, but there seems to be some question of whether we should add the word Louisiana or not. And like I said, the problem seems to be that I'm understanding from the Lyft people and Uber people, that they are worried about the fact that they can't include college students. That would be the only way I could see, if we did move forward with adding the word Louisiana at some point, that some of these council members might feel necessary, that would be the only way around that situation. Am I right, pretty much?
You would have to put an exception in
An
law.
exception, that's what I'm talking about,
If you
yes.
put Louisiana, then, and the college student did not have a Louisiana driver's
You would
license,
have to put the
you
exception,
would have to put
correct?
some kind of exception in the law for that.
Exactly, that's what I was saying. If anyone's worried about it, I just wanted to put it out there. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Impastato, you have the floor.
Sorry to put you in this situation.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of the amendment proposed by Councilman Segura for a valid driver's license. I just want to make the point where we're delving from the legislative side to the implementation and enforcement side, and kind of, I think, dovetailing on something Mr. Rapier said. And I want to caution us not to delve too far into the enforcement side of it. Whether a person is complying with Louisiana law or not is between the police and them. I don't know that it's within our province or necessity to try and re-legislate enforcement of Louisiana law. A valid driver's license, I think, suffices, does the trick, and whether or not whatever police department deems that license, whether it's Class D, Class E, Class Z, whatever, is compliant with Louisiana law, is between them and the policeman who pulls them over to earn fees for the city of Kenner. But I think that's between them, and I think we should avoid going beyond that and overly regulating this any more than is necessary.
Thank you, Councilman. I'd like to just add, too, that the law would be state law, and the state of Louisiana is the one to tell us what the law is. And the Attorney General's office is a good starting point to define what the requirements are under state law. We know what our requirements will be, and hopefully we'll pass that ordinance today with the amendment. we know what our requirements are, we hesitate to speak on behalf of the state of Louisiana and the Attorney General's office. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, seeing no further discussion, council members, would you please vote on the amendment, whether it's going to be a valid driver's license or not? Is that what we're voting on now? Aye.
Motion passes 7-0 on that amendment. Your next amendment tonight would be under Section 1683 F4. It will now read that the applicant has a felony charge pending for any of the felony offenses listed in subsections 1 and 2 above, or that is how Section 4 would read. Motion by Councilmember Segura, seconded by
Councilman Klein.
Any discussion on that amendment? All council members, please vote.
Aye.
That amendment would pass 7-0. Your next amendment this evening would be under Section 1683 as well. We will be inserting all the way at the end subsection H that will read, every quarter, the department may send to any TNC a list of up to 25 TNC drivers for a random background check. 90% of the drivers selected for a random background check shall come from the 500 drivers with the most rides in the previous quarter, and the remaining 10% shall be selected from all of the other drivers. Within 5 days of receiving the list, the company shall complete the random background check as required in Section 16-38 and provide the results to the department.
Okay. Council members, please vote on.
Motion by Councilmember Segura.
I second it.
Second by Councilmember
Okay,
Klein.
Any discussion? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. It says 25 drivers per quarter, and 90% of those are going to be selected from the drivers that drive the most, the top 500 drivers. So that means that 22 and a half drivers, I don't know how they're going to do a half, but 22 and a half drivers are going to come from that top 500, and then they're going to take 10% of the remaining drivers, which comes out to 2.5 drivers. So again, I don't know how they're going to, how we're going to come up with 2.5. But my point being here is we have 25 drivers out of a total of, it was said before, Zach from the city of New Orleans said that the airport has 1,000 rides a day. So I'm assuming that not everybody works the airport, so I'm assuming that they have literally thousands of TNC drivers, maybe 5,000. So the way this reads, that's such a small percentage of the total drivers that are out there that are going to be drug tested. So it's really not a level playing field with all of the other vehicle for hire industries or companies, because they're testing 100% of their people. And I mean, this is a very, very low number. So, I just wanted to make that point, and that's it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay. Councilman DeFrancis, you got the floor?
It says you're one of four. Am I next, or I think Councilman
Carroll,
Carroll
you have the
hasn't had
floor.
one. Let's let him go
Simple
first.
question. Yes.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to ask Mr. Butterworth or one of the other Uber or Lyft attorneys to come up and to address this particular question about how is the percentage for the drug testing being done, even if whatever the drug testing is that you guys are doing, what is the percentage that is being used? If there is a percentage, if it's 100%, if it's part of the population, or what it is, so I can have some understanding for Orleans and Jefferson?
Absolutely, Councilmember. The requirement as it exists in Orleans and Jefferson is a flat number on a quarterly basis. I don't have the ordinance in front of me right now. It's either 10 or 25, but it's a flat number that is required on a quarterly basis. There is not a percentage requirement as it relates to the number of hours that those drivers drive. I would flag that the way that this is drafted right now, there's a few problems. The first being this percentage issue where you've got this kind of half driver. The other being that at the front of this provision, it states that the department shall make a request for the names of these drivers. It names the drivers, and it says you have to turn them over. 90% has to come from the top drivers. However, the department doesn't know who the top drivers are because there's not numbers that are remitted to the department on a per-driver basis, so there's no way for that report to actually be generated. So what would have to happen would be to mirror, if this is the intent of the body, would be to mirror what Jefferson and what Orleans have done, where it's a flat amount without that hourly amount there, or it would have to be changed so that there's a request sent over. But as drafted right now, the cleanest way would be, I believe, to mirror Jefferson and Orleans in that regard, or revisit this issue at a later time. But as currently drafted, it's not capable of being fulfilled on either side of the equation.
So the flat amount is not all of the drivers. It's a specific number that has been chosen by the Jefferson Parish Council of the entire total applicants of TNC drivers.
That's accurate. For
And you just don't remember what that number is right now.
If I had it in front of me, I could say it. But I believe it's 25 for Jefferson and for Orleans.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay.
Something real quick, because I spoke.
I was going to explain it. Go ahead.
Do you mind?
No, he can go first, and
Okay.
I was
Councilman
going
Moreno,
to
you-
explain it anyway.
I was talking about drug testing. This is on background tests, okay? This is on a background check, so I kind of jumped ahead because the next one is on drug testing. So I just wanted to clarify that because I did say drug testing.
Absolutely, Councilmember. It would be the same for either as current.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Councilman DeFrancis, you.
I'd like to clarify this a little bit. Mr. Wetzel, would you mind helping me out? Because I think you and I are on the same page on this. You have had to take many math courses, I know, to get where you are. And you know when you take a math class, it talks about doing percentages, and when the number comes out to be an even number, an odd number, point something. Am I correct? And when it's 0.5, there's no such thing as a half person. We all understand that. But when it's 0.5, you look at the 0.5 being the decimal point, 0.5. You look at the previous number, whether it's odd or even, and that determines whether you go up one number or down one number. Am I not correct?
That is correct.
All right, so 22.5, sir. Would it be 23 or would it be 22?
23.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to say to people, that you look at the previous numbers. So when we're talking about 90% of 25 of the 500, okay, we're talking about taking 23 drivers and either doing background checks or doing drug testing, which we're going to be talking about in the next few minutes. Am I correct? Then we look at the 10%. So let's assume a low number of people drive for Uber or Lyft. I'm going to pick a really easy number. I could have picked 7,500, which I did earlier, but we'll pick 1,000 so it makes it easy for everyone listening. If you take 10% of 1,000, you and I both know that that number is? So when we're talking about either drug testing or when we're talking about doing background checks, we're talking about not just a few people, we're talking about 125 people from that pool. And I just wanted to put that out there because I think there was a lot of confusion as to exactly what it means. And obviously, we're not going to test half a person, okay? But we do follow mathematical rules when we're trying to determine how many people we have to test for drugs or on which we need to do background checks. Am I not correct? I just wanted to put it out there. It's not such a small number, and it alternates. You know, this might be this 100 this time, next quarter it'll be a different 100. This quarter it's 23 from this group, it'll be 23, a different 23 possibly. So we are alternating. And I'm just going to put it on the record, I'm sorry, I think it's important. I am very, very, very pro doing major background checks. I think it's imperative for the safety of our public, and so I'm very much in favor of that. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I'm also very much in favor of doing drug testing, as we just explained. But I'm going to also put it on the record because I don't know if this is actually, I think we need to do both random, which I totally agree is very, 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 very good way of doing it. But I also think initially we need to do drug testing on everyone, and then we do random from then on. And the reason being, there are some that are never going to get drug tested. It's just the lot that takes place. But if we do it initially, and then they know they may have random in the future, and they may be picked for those random drug tests, I'm telling you, they're going to be careful to make sure that they can pass those tests if they want to continue to drive. So I just wanted to clarify some of the misconceptions that might exist out there. So thank you, Council President, for letting me do that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Councilman Impastato, you got the floor.
As much as the refresher course on rounding up is appreciated, I am unaware of any law that allows you to round up or down when counting people. I'm unaware of it. I might have skipped that class in law school, but I'm fairly certain that when it comes to legislation, there is no such thing as rounding up or down. Would you? Can I get an amen on that, Mr. Rapier?
Certainly, but your ordinance also, or the proposed ordinance says a list of up to 25 people.
Okay.
So whether you send 25 or 24 or 23,
Understood.
you can end up in the same.
So it could be 24, 10%, would be 2.4 people.
Well, no, you could, Councilman, if you were picking from a list to send up to 25 people, and you split it 90-10, you could end up sending whatever that number, and I'm not a math guy, but you could send it as long as you didn't send more than 25 people.
I understand, but the fact of the matter is, there are a number of different combinations that would lead us to have to do background checks, and then I won't get overly graphic on the drug testing and what you'd have to do to test a partial person. But nonetheless, the challenge that it reveals is that we're dealing with a proposed an amendment that is nowhere found in the country, and I think we're seeing why, because it's functionally unworkable. And it's inconsistent with the business model. It's inconsistent with the record keeping that they currently have, as Mr. Giuliano explained. And the real problem, my real concern with it is, I don't know, and I asked this earlier, I just don't know what has been shown from a data and analysis standpoint or statistical support to show or suggest that the background checks are in any way substandard, because that's what this is. This is an auditing requirement. This is an audit that suggests or presupposes that the background checks that are being done are inefficient or inadequate. Well, we have no evidence of that. And I'm not talking about an individual anecdote, because, look, I could sit and rest assured anyone up here could present a case or an incident in which a cab driver, a non-commercial driver, an 18-wheeler driver, or any driver on the road committed an act of negligence that hurt someone or even acted criminally. We could do that anecdotally all we want. So to have one incident here or one incident there, I think is not showing the full picture of things. If we're going to make a legislative change and an amendment, to me, we need more data to suggest that what is currently being done and that the regulations that have been put in place by all of our counterparts are not functioning properly or not providing the safety and security and the data that we're looking for. So absent that, I can't propose, be in favor of the amendment as currently drafted. So.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Anyone else? You want to speak? I think Councilman DeFrancis already spoke. Right. Councilman Carroll, you wish to speak? You did? Okay. I think that's all.
Okay, well, no, I'll take my turn then.
Councilman Seguin, you
I was
got-
just reading others ahead of me. I do appreciate the math problem. I do appreciate the legal problem. And if I can, Mr. Brown, please come forward.
All right.
Mr. Segura, I was sort of hoping to get a chance to.
Okay. Well, as you may recall, at the committee meeting of the, this committee meeting that we had Monday morning of the Chapter 16 Subcommittee, when we were discussing a potential amendment that I was interested in proposing relative to the limiting or suggesting that the tests be performed, whether it be background or drug testing, on these top 400 or 500. 400 was what I used. Another comment was made 5, so I didn't have a problem. And then as we were discussing that, you made a recommendation. And your recommendation was the 90-10. Would you please expound on that, how and why you think that's functional?
I'll be happy to. And for the benefit of the council members who were not at that committee meeting and for the audience, the discussion that was going on was the fact that the proposal was to test 25 drivers out of the top 400 or 500. And the point was made by 2 or 3 of the committee members that, well, that means that the really part-time drivers don't have any chance of being tested. And the feeling, as I sensed it from the committee members, was that you wanted to test them also, but you wanted to concentrate on the top 400 or 500 drivers. And I've made the suggestion, well, just say 90% of them shall come from the top 400 or 500 drivers and 10% from the remainder, without even thinking about the fact that the number 25 is an odd number. After I got home, I thought about that, and I thought, well, if they used that suggestion, and y'all did seem to like the suggestion, the 4 council members there, I figured, well, I'm sure they'll just pick a number, like 22 or 23 will be tested from the top 500, and then 2 or 3 will be tested from the remainder. But that's how this came about. Did I explain it adequately?
Sure, and that helps me, as you just also said, that maybe instead of using the percent, we do change, or at some point change and make it a flat number, 23, 2. Huh? Okay, I'm not sure.
Is that all?
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Okay, ready to vote?
Please vote on the amendment. Sure. You want me to read the amendment again? Section 8 would read, every quarter, the department may send to any TNC a list of up to 25 TNC drivers for a random background check. 90% of the drivers selected for a random background check shall come from the 500 drivers with the most rides in the previous quarter, and the remaining 10% shall be selected from all of the other drivers. Within 5 days of receiving the list, the company shall complete the random background check as required in Section 16-38 and provide the results to the department. The motion was Councilman Segura, second by Councilmember Klein. All council members, please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-2. Council members Impastato and Reyno are opposed. The next amendment we will entertain tonight would be under Section 1684. Section A will read, every quarter, the Department of Inspection and Code Enforcement is authorized to send any TNC a list of up to 25 TNC drivers for random drug testing. 90% of the drivers selected for a random drug screen shall come from the 500 drivers with the most rides in the previous quarter, and the remaining 10% shall be selected from all of the other drivers. Within 24 hours of receiving the list, the TNC shall advise the drivers that they must obtain a drug test from a Department of Inspection and Code Enforcement approved testing facility. The driver shall obtain the drug test within 24 hours of receiving the notice from the TNC. If I could get a motion and a second on the amendment?
Move.
I'll second it.
Motion by Councilmember Segura, second by Councilmember Klein on the amendment. Any discussion this evening?
Councilman DeFrancis, you have the floor.
I have a real quick question because of the problem that arose before. Would it make anyone would anyone be more comfortable Mr. Rapier, if instead of doing 90-10, we did a flat number of 22 or 23 and then did a 10% for the remaining drivers? Would that be a better solution? I'm just asking.
22 and 3.
22 or 23, whatever you all choose.
22 and then 3 for the,
10% for
Other.
the remaining, if that would be better.
It is strictly at y'all's call.
Okay, I just wanted to ask if that was
all right.
anything
I would like
that-
a motion to amend what we have on the floor to go with 22 on the top, 500, and 3 on the rest.
And 10% on the rest?
No, let's just
And
leave the
3?
percentages out because
Well, then
we
you can't do
miscalculated the percentage.
3 people? 10% of the remaining drivers would be 3 people? I don't think so. What do you mean
10%.
by 3 people?
It'd be a total of 25 persons.
Period? No. I'm going to vote against it, sorry.
Okay.
No. Mm-mm. No, you have a right to propose it. I'm just very uncomfortable with that.
Okay.
Yeah. 25 people out of 1,000? Come on,
Amendment.
please. You need to put whatever your proposal is again, please, and we can vote on it.
Proposal is the original proposal.
Right, I'll put it afterwards.
Yes.
I'll vote against it. All right, call for a vote.
Okay, my motion was Councilmember Segura, second by Klein on the First Amendment.
Right.
Is there a point of clarification? Are we going to amend that amendment to change
No, we
a
have to
number?
vote on the original.
Yes, Councilman Impostado, you got the floor.
Yeah, I just think all this is doing is evidencing that there is disagreement, there is lack of clarity, there is, this happens with amendments that are given to you the day before a council meeting, okay? So while I may be procedurally out of order, I'm going to move at this point to defer the entire legislation, so all of these issues, this is clearly emblematic of a lack of clarity and lack of understanding amongst the council dais. So I think the most appropriate, most efficient way to handle this is to address these issues within the next 2 weeks, and we can ferret all of this out rather than continuing. We haven't even gotten to the substantive ordinance. So I want to make a motion to defer at this time to the next meeting.
Well, I make a motion to defer only that amendment.
Well,
Okay, point of clarification. The motion for deferral, do I have a second on Councilmember Impastado's deferral?
We can't do it in that order, can we?
I have no second, so we go
have
back to
point
the
of order.
original
I've gotta
amendment,
ask-
which was,
I'm sorry, Council Clerk, I have a point of order.
okay.
I believe that we already had a proposal on the floor. I was under the impression we had to vote on that first before we could do a deferral. Am
We
I
do.
wrong?
Councilman Impastado got the floor. He made a motion.
But
There
was
was
there-
no
wasn't there a
second, so
motion?
that motion fails, so now you're back to your amendment.
But I still have the floor on the amendment.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
On the amendment, and I'm going to talk about, I guess, both or the entire, however you want to say it. Again, I bring up the same issue. This is proposing something that does not exist in any jurisdiction in the country, and so I don't understand what the evidence is to suggest that this is necessary, that we know something in Kenner that the rest of the world apparently doesn't know. I haven't seen that. Additionally, by its very nature, the proposal makes the random drug testing statistically unreliable. The very benefit of random drug testing is its randomness. And anyone who believes in the laws of statistics and the manner in which statistics are governed knows the randomness is the key to the reliability. When you then begin to adjust and amend your sample size by saying we're only going to take our sample from this section versus that section, you then render your results unreliable. So you're changing and modifying the statistics that then takes away the very effectiveness of the random drug testing. Along those lines, one of the challenges that I see is if we do assume, all of this presupposes and assumes that there are thousands of drivers, so to speak, on the platform. if 90% are only coming from the first 500, then the remaining other drivers have an assurance that basically there's little or no shot that they're ever going to be drug tested. So you're giving them a false assurance that they can do whatever they want, they can violate the rules, they can do drugs, and frankly, they're never going to be tested because it's such a small percentage that would ever be tested from a much larger sample size. So I think, in fact, while the attempt may be to increase safety by imposing this 90-10 requirement or whatever numbers you come up with, by saying some huge number has to come from, some high proportion has to come from the first 500, I believe you're actually increasing the safety risk rather than enhancing safety, which is what is intended to be done. And so for that reason, I think this is a mistake. And keep in mind, the drivers who drive the most have the most incentive to stay clean, to follow the rules, because they know they have to do this for their livelihood. So I think the more you take away the randomness, the more you say only these people are going to be tested, I think you're creating safety risks that certainly are not intended to be created. So for those reasons, I'm opposed to this amendment.
All right. Councilman DeFrancis, you got the floor.
Well, I understand why Councilman Impastato feels as he does. But let me assure you that when you do statistics and when you do probability, the results are, the information is quite different than you get when you do that. First of all, if we're going to stick with 25 out of every driver that drives, you might have 1,000 people driving. And so we think that if we do 25 at a time, that we're going to have a statistically important amount of information that we're going to get about how many drivers really are using drugs. 25 out of 1,000, or let's do 25 out of 7,500 if that's how many drivers we have. A small number like 25 is going to tell us the kind of information we need to know whether our drivers are taking drugs or not. That number is unbelievably small. And at any time when you do random, when you flip a coin, with whether it's heads or tail, it doesn't matter how many times you do it, the probability always remains the same. That's mathematically sound. And when we talked about 25 versus from one group, we don't have to do it that way. We can pick a really big number. We can make a really big percentage out of the total. We can do it any number of ways. This was a way to try to address the situation. And if we have to change it from 90% of 25 to 22 or 23, I would have had no problem whatsoever. I still want the others tested. And by testing, let's say 100 out of 1,000, those 1,000 do not know whether they're going to be tested at any moment in time. And they could come up this quarter or next quarter or the other quarters. So there is a randomness there. And each time that that we do that, every driver has the same probability of being called up as anybody else. Because that's how it works. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Right now, the TNCs are unregulated. There's no drug testing, no background checks. We need to get something in place to regulate everyone. So, any other amendments? No.
Yes.
Okay. All right, council members, please vote. Aye.
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 Yes, as I read it into the record. Yes. Councilman Segura? Motion passes 5-2. Councilmembers Impastato and Reyno are opposed. Back to your original ordinance as amended. Councilman Reyno, did you want to entertain your amendments at this time, or you? Yes. Okay. I've received a request from Councilman Reyno to amend the legislation, also to, you want me to read all of them? Are you? Okay, under Section 1, under Section 1681, number 3, would read possess the valid Louisiana driver's license. That's Councilman Reyno's first amendment. I have a motion by Councilmember Reyno. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Councilmember DeFrances for it to read possess the valid Louisiana driver's license.
You got a question?
Yes.
Councilman Wilmot, you got the floor.
Find out, and a legal question, of course, I wanted to find out, we already passed one amendment, and then this is another amendment of the same nature, except it has the word Louisiana in it, I believe.
It's a different amendment. It's adding a different word. It was not what the First Amendment was.
Right, so that being the case, the other amendment that we previously passed, if we pass this one, this is going to supersede the first one?
That is correct.
Okay, so if we're happy with the first one, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the amendment?
Councilman DeFrancis, you have the floor.
The reason I seconded this, because I thought it was imperative, I thought earlier, that we have the discussion that actually ensued, and that is, whether we add that word or not, I just wanted to put it on the record again. Okay. I wanted to put it on the record again, that whether we add the word Louisiana or we don't add the word Louisiana, that the impact would be identical because, again, of what we discussed earlier. Am I correct, Mr. Rapier? Basically.
The only change that if you were to adopt this regulation would be, it would require somebody to have only a Louisiana license, and somebody from another state with another state's license would not be able to operate under our rules.
But if they did have a valid, on the original that we proposed earlier, they could, as long as they followed all the statutes of Louisiana.
That's correct.
Thank you. I just needed to put that on the record again. Thank you.
Okay. All councilmen, you want to speak on your amendment?
Okay. Okay, Councilman Reyno, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Councilman Segura, for those kind words of. I am asking, really, I'm asking to put one word in there, because we've already passed the amendment adding valid driver's license. So really, we're adding the word valid Louisiana, so the word that I'm adding is Louisiana. You know, I would hope that Uber and Lyft and any other TNCs would want to hire residents from Louisiana before they hire somebody from out of state. And I heard the discussion regarding college students and having a license from, another state because they're attending college here. I just think adding the word Louisiana lets the people out there know that we want to hire, residents of Louisiana first. And it also kind of clarifies, makes it a little bit easier for Chief Glazer's men, if they're pulled over, that they can see that they have a Louisiana license. So I ask for your support, and I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Council members, please vote. Nay.
Yay.
Nay.
The motion fails, 6-1. Councilmembers Impastato, Wilmot, Klein, DeFrances, Segura, and Carroll are opposed. The next amendment that Councilmember Reyno has presented would be to amend the following Section 4 to possess proof of Louisiana registration for the motor vehicle used for transportation network services. I have a motion by Councilmember Reyno. Do I have a second this evening? No second. The amendment fails for lack of a second. The next amendment that Councilman Reyno has submitted this evening would be under Section 16-110. it would read, TNC drivers are not exempt from the requirements of this division.
Move.
I have a motion by Councilmember Reno. Do I have a second this evening?
Do we have a,
I would need to get a second for, second by Councilman Carroll on the amendment. Councilman Reno, would you like to open?
Yes. But the reason that I'm putting this amendment up is because we've had lots of discussion regarding, safety and the measures of drug testing and background checks. By putting the word "not exempt" from this division, requirements of this division, basically it's creating a level playing field for all businesses that operate vehicle for hire. It's basically what I'm trying to accomplish here. So this would require that every driver for Uber and Lyft, and I'm just using them, or whatever TNC, would be required to have a drug test prior to be able to drive. It basically just confirms all of the stuff in background checks and everything else that all of the other vehicle for hire companies have to comply with. And I'm asking for your support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah. Councilman Carroll, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like the attorney, Mr. Raffier, to give me a attorney's opinion on what Councilman Reno just said as it relates to adding that word to it, and how does it affect the legislation as it is by adding it?
The current proposed ordinance exempts TNC drivers from having a driver permit. And the amendment that Councilman Reno is proposing would remove that exemption. So if that is the case, then somebody wishing to drive for a TNC would have to, assuming it's passed and adopted, then a TNC driver would end up coming to Kenner and applying for a driver's permit and complying with all of the requirements that are contained within the driver's permit, some of which are not contained in the requirements for a TNC driver as the ordinance is currently drafted.
Thank you, sir.
Which includes a physician statement, which includes pre-employment, pre-application drug screening, includes some other issues along those lines, all of which I haven't listed out to be able to give you an exhaustive list, but it would require the TNC driver to get the same driver permit that a taxi cab driver currently has to get.
Thank you. That means you gave me more than enough. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilman Wilmot, you have the floor.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. First off, I just want to say that we've tried to be fair to everyone. We've actually heard months and months of meetings and input from different people. So I just want to chime in with that first before I go any further. Then on this particular issue, though, I do want to ask if Nick, Juliana, if you can come up and to the microphone. Just address your concerns, if you have any, regarding this issue.
Sure. So without having the language reviewed prior to now, and in thinking of the months that have been spent by the council working group working on this issue, this amendment, as I understand it, as it was just verbally relayed, would be in direct opposition to the recommendations that were made by the working group, and would be putting requirements on TNC drivers that are not found in Orleans, Jefferson, Gretna, or any jurisdiction in the United States, and it would be contrary to what the working group has come forward with. I will say, and I said at the top of the order when we came in here earlier this evening, having not seen this before and hearing this for the first time, were this amendment to be adopted, our company would have to look very seriously about whether we could continue to serve the airport and whether we would be able to apply under the requirements that would be promulgated here. This would be in direct opposition to what every other jurisdiction in the United States has adopted. Does that sufficiently answer your question, Councilman?
So obviously, it'd be harmful, you believe, if this were to pass?
The requirements for, TNC drivers are overwhelmingly part-time drivers. They undergo a nationally accredited third-party background screening under the provisions provided here. They would be subject to random drug screening, which has been pointed out previously is far more effective than going up, doing something in a cup one time and being done with it. I would stress that these requirements have not been applied to TNC drivers historically for a host of reasons. They use their personal vehicles. They are insured under a master insurance policy that's carried by the TNC, which, again, is many times over the insurance that's carried by taxi or limo. It's a $1 million policy. It exceeds both the commercial and the personal liability rates anywhere in the United States. So there's a host of differences between what this body has contemplated previously and what this amendment would do. And respectfully, my overwhelming guess, not having the language right in front of me, would be that our company would not be able to operate in Kenner were this amendment to be adopted.
I appreciate your input. Thank you. And I would like to say again, the amount of time that everybody's put in has been phenomenal. Wow. I mean, even from the city attorney's office, thank you very much. And a lot of members in the audience, I know have been here time in and time out. We've had numerous council meetings on this, so, and on both sides. I mean, the taxi cabs, the TNCs, everybody. We're trying to treat everybody fairly. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman Wilmot. Councilman DeFrancis?
I'm sorry. I feel terrible. I keep coming to you over and over again. Other than getting a drug test prior to hire, all right, what could you again clarify for me, because this is that important, what other issues would be required according to Councilman Reno's proposal?
It would require a physician statement,
Okay, which I don't think we need.
which would
Okay.
a physician statement that would certify that the applicant doesn't have any disease and infirmity which would make him an unsafe or unsatisfactory driver. It would require a pre-application drug screen. It would require a background check, criminal background check, which would be similar to the one that is already required. And the disqualification requirements are the same. So I think the major additions that this would add to it would be the physician statement, it would be mainly the physician statement and the pre-application drug screen.
Okay.
Would be the two things that in a quick glance through that, that it would add.
We already, okay, and I appreciate that, because you know how strongly I feel about it, that besides random, I think you have to have a a drug test on applicants prior to being hired. However, I mentioned this before. I know that our taxi cab drivers have to get a medical examination in order, but I've talked to some of the council people, and basically, I really felt that we should eliminate it both for taxi drivers and for Uber and Lyft, because I'll be honest with you, if you look at history, look at someone like Pete Maravich. He had despite the many physicals he had to take, they never did find the problem that he had with his heart, just as an example. And just because you don't have a problem today, you could have, you could need surgery down the line. So that's the only one I have a problem with. I definitely agree with background checks. I definitely agree with pre-hiring to do drug testing. So that's the only one. And maybe we can address that later on if we think it's unnecessary and remove it at some point in time. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Councilman Reynaud, you can close.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I mentioned about a level playing field. This will create that level playing field. This will also make all for-hire companies not only be level, but it also provides for much better safety for all of our residents. So with that said, you know, I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Councilman, please vote. Nay.
Nay. Councilman Segura? Councilman DeFrances?
Nay.
Motion fails. 2-5. Council members Carroll, Segura, Klein, Wilmot are opposed. Back to your original ordinance as amended.
Okay. Okay, Councilman Impostado, you have the floor.
To close out the amendment part of this, I move to amend the original legislation to remove Section 16-226, which relates to the minimum rates to and from the airport for TNCs. That section currently reads, rates to or from Louis Armstrong International Airport shall not be less than the fares listed in Section 16-209 of this chapter. My motion is to remove that section from the TNC ordinance.
Do we have a second on it?
Amendment would fail due to a lack of a second. Back to the original motion as amended, your original ordinance as amended.
Councilman, please vote.
No.
Oh,
Any
you got-
discussion?
A little
Yeah,
discussion.
Councilman,
You'll have this.
you next, I think you next. Councilman Carroll's next. Councilman Carroll, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Man, I don't know if I need to just rewind everything again because a lot's been said, but and I don't want to be redundant with everything that we've addressed. But you know, as it relates to, we realize there's a lot of passion here for people who are taxi drivers, for people who are Uber or Lyft, or for that matter, any other company, TNC company that we would enjoy and look forward to coming to the city of Kenner. We use those two companies as if they are the monopoly of it, but there are other companies. So we look forward to having them come into the city and also to give the opportunity for other city and greater New Orleans area people to participate. There is no pro or con from myself, and I'm sure I can speak for the council as it relates to one over the other or one less than the other. You know, I guess our responsibility is to be fair. And I think for us, that is the big key. Now, some people's version of fair maybe is a little different, but I think in the end, everyone wants to be fair. And I think we have worked with this, along with the committees, along with the people, along with the companies, to try to think of something that was fair. If I were to write this myself, this ordinance today on Thursday, and look at it again on Friday, I would probably change something. So there is no utopia here. Nothing is perfect. It will never be. And I can see where this will evolve as we go forward. Our state government has not had the opportunity, and I don't believe, as Mr. Brown said, they're going to be able to come to any type of fruition before the end of the session. I just don't believe that. So, you know, we're no different, but I believe from a financial standpoint, we, the council, the mayor, the administration, have to do something because it does affect, from a financial end, zero or something. And I much prefer something than zero. And as we go further, we'll be able to address things and to make it better. So just based on that, I think I will be supporting it to move forward. Not to say we're not going to revisit some things, because I think we will. Even after the state goes forward, we may have to revisit some things. I'm not sure how is that going to supersede us, or will it replace us, or whatever. We just don't know. But I think it's important today that we move forward with our actions today. And I think we're being fair. I think we obviously don't agree with everything from either side, but I think today is something that we have to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman Carroll. Councilman Wilmot, you have the floor.
Thank you. Again, I'd just like to say this has been a very complex matter. We've looked at it for a very, very long time. Of course, my colleagues have looked at it even longer than I, because I've only been on the council now for around 5-6 months, and they've looked at it maybe at least another 6 months prior to that. So this has been here. It's been a tough issue for all of us, and we're trying to do the best we can and be fair with everybody involved. Of course, there has been legislation up in Baton Rouge. We know that it has been up there. We understand that it's been involuntary deferred is the terminology that they use, which means it's not active. But can it be resurrected, if you will? Possibly. Could somebody put a hitchhiker on a bill? Possibly. The session isn't over till it's over. And that's just the way it works in Baton Rouge. So I caution, and it's very important that we support this piece of legislation. There is a time factor involved, and I think we need to pass something out of here today. It's long enough, and it's due. So I'll be supporting it, and I just want to make sure everybody knows that, and thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Wilmot. Councilman DeFrancis, you have the floor.
Thank you. Councilman Wilmot just pointed out why he thought it was imperative that we vote on this piece of legislation, whether you vote for it or against it at this time, because of exactly what he talked about, which is what might happen in Baton Rouge, and why it's important to have something in place for that reason alone, if for no other reason at this point in time. And there are a lot of other reasons, of course. However, also Councilman Carroll and I agree on something. This is not a perfect piece of legislation. Very few pieces of legislation, if any, are perfect. But you still start with a base. And this is the basic piece of legislation. And please remember, and you all know this, that any piece of legislation can be amended at any point in the future if we get additional information that requires us to take a second look and possibly amend it. So we have that option in the future if that needs to happen, whether it's what Councilman Impastato was talking about in one section or other council people talked about in other sections. So we have that ability to amend in the future as needed, as we see that we need to readdress certain issues. So therefore, I too agree that we need to move forward at this time for the reasons we mentioned.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Segura, you have the floor.
Impastato is next in line.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Impastato.
Before I give my position, I wanted to ask a couple of questions to the representatives of Uber and Lyft who are here. Mr. Giuliano, Mr. Alborg, could y'all come up? In whichever order you like. We usually say Uber first, so maybe it would be polite if we let Lyft go first. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. Mr. Alborg,
Yes, sir.
you've heard, I mean, you've been here for the whole discussion on all the different amendments that were passed and failed and whatnot. Based on the current version as it is now, do you believe this legislation as proposed would allow Lyft to operate appropriately in this jurisdiction?
Thank you, Councilman. I think we have serious concerns about certain parts of the ordinance. I think obviously y'all talked earlier about some of these provisions being sort of the first in the country, and I think we'll have to evaluate that. I think there are also concerns about some of the rates in the ordinance both to and from the airport. I think that's something that we have to look at as well. So I think the bottom line is we really have to, sort of look long and hard about how we're going to operate with the ordinance that could be passed this evening.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Giuliano, same question. Based on the version that is on the table at this point, will Uber feel that it's able to operate in this jurisdiction?
As drafted currently, council member, our company would not be able to operate in Kenner were this ordinance to pass. The section, I believe it's 16-226 that was referenced earlier, that talks about minimum rates to and from the airport, and then minimum rates from the airport to different areas within Kenner, are totally at odds with the fundamental business model governing how transportation network companies are able to provide safe rides to millions of people across the United States every day. They represent a series of requirements that have not been applied to transportation network companies anywhere in the world, much less in the United States, and that we would not be able to apply for a permit under. So, you know, I recognize that there can be further discussion going forward to address this issue, but as drafted right now, we would not be able to operate were this ordinance to be enforced.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that's precisely what I was concerned about, is I'd like to consider myself an advocate for taxi cabs, for Uber, for Lyft, for TNCs, but most importantly, I'm an advocate for the constituents that I represent. And I'm a believer that if we have an opportunity in government to allow our constituents to have a service that they desperately want in the most cost-effective, most efficient manner possible, I think it is within our obligation and our duty to do so. We have been presented substantial discussion that the scheme that is being proposed is overly burdensome, over-regulation, and would be the most onerous regulatory scheme in the country for TNCs. That is not a contest that I think the city of Kenner should want to win. If you believe in free market capitalism, if you believe in economic development, I'm a believer that that comes with reducing regulation, reducing fees, reducing assessments, reducing taxes. This does not do that. And that's my concern. A lot of it, and look, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. The amount of labor that has been put forth by the 7 members on the dais is substantial. There's no question about that. And there's no question that the best interests of the community are at the forefront of every person, all of my colleagues' motivations. I have no questions about that. But unfortunately, I think what is getting lost here is what are the needs of our community? Our needs of the community is to have the service. And as far as the minimum rates at the airport, I agree, level playing field. So take the minimum rates away for the taxis as well. Let them compete in the free market, charging whatever fees the market will bear. Every one of us here that is in business has to deal with the same thing. You compete based on pricing, based on demand, based on supply. Let everyone have the freedom to compete. And that applies to the cabs as well as to the TNCs. Unfortunately, when that was proposed, what the cab union and everyone from the cab industry said is, no, 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 you can't take away the minimum pricing. You can't do that. We'd rather have no minimums for Uber, but minimums for us. That's price fixing. And I don't know of another industry that the city of Kenner regulates so pervasively as what we're trying to do here. And so I would prefer a scheme, and look, a lot of this, and I give credit to the members of the subcommittee, Councilman Segura. Look, Councilman Segura and I, months ago, I mean, we had major disagreements on a number of things, and I got to say, a lot of the things that I was hoping were put in are in, and he's in agreement with, so I appreciate that. There's been a lot of willingness to move and whatnot, and that's certainly appreciated, but unfortunately, while I'm in favor of the TNCs as well as the taxis and in favor of the level playing field, I think there's another way to do it. Unfortunately, there are things that suggest what we're doing in areas like occupational license are a problem. There's a study from George Mason University that discussed occupational licenses across the 50 states, an article called The Freedom of 50 States. Louisiana ranked 6th worst in the country. Basically meaning we had the 6th most onerous occupational license requirements. Now that's the state, that's not the city of Kenner, but my point is we got an opportunity to break that trend and make it and encourage economic development, encourage business development. Business regulation by the government does not encourage economic development. And so I would ask that this be voted down and we go back to the drawing board with something that would not persuade the TNCs, an industry that is not currently generating any revenue for the city of Kenner. Let's not push them away. Let's not drive them away by over-regulating them. And I would ask my colleagues to take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you.
Councilman Segura?
Okay. To close, then, I would ask one more question of Mr. Giuliano. The comment of your answer to Councilman Impastato on the rate structure, meaning the fee from the airport to the city of New Orleans, which right now is set at $36. You're saying that if that's in place, then you cannot operate.
There are a number of stipulations to that clause, that being one of them. The remainder of that, what that clause does is it cites Section 229, which is above that, that promulgates rates applicable to taxi cabs based presumably on taxi meter readings that have been set that talk about if you're going from this street in Kenner or this neighborhood in Kenner to the airport, or from the airport to those different areas, there are rates. And that puts TNCs under existing cab rates. So that's a portion of that section. The other portion of that section is indeed taking the $33 minimum that's currently at MSY, moving it to 36. So you're going to wind up with the airport saying one number, Kenner saying a different number, having a jurisdictional question of which one is valid, which is kind of an open question. And then beyond that point, there's a stipulation in Section 209 for a $15 charge for a third passenger in a vehicle and over 3 passengers. So if you've got 5 people, you've got an additional $30 worth of surcharges there. There's for our business model, to add a $15 charge for having a third passenger is driving the prices to a point where consumers aren't going to choose it. It's beyond what any jurisdiction, state, local, airport, anybody else has ever prescribed for TNCs before. So yes, that section for us represents something that we would not be able to apply for a permit under because it assumes taxi cab rates and it applies taxi cab legacy neighborhood provisions to TNCs.
Okay, well, first, on several of your comments, first comment, you referred to this surge pricing. You do not have surge pricing in your price structure?
I did not refer to surge pricing.
I'm sorry, what word did you use then to talk about the additional $15 a person?
So it's the ordinance as drafted in section, I believe it's 209, I don't have it in front of me. It references a $15 charge for a third person in the vehicle.
Okay. Well, then, maybe I misunderstood the third person, but somehow I heard you say surge pricing in there.
It's possible, I'm tired.
Okay. So I go back to my question. Does anywhere in your rate structure you have surge pricing?
We have dynamic pricing, which is referred to as surge pricing. Yes, that is not what this.
Okay. So that surge pricing says that if a person in Kenner takes your service to New Orleans and they're charged a price, then when they want to return, you can charge whatever you want in return.
That is not surge pricing, no.
What is that then?
I'm not quite sure of your question, Councilman.
Well, I get, and I'm sure others have, but I have received complaints from people who tell me they've taken an Uber from Kenner to New Orleans for an event. They're charged maybe $11. But then when the event's over and they try to leave, it could be $30, $40.
So our pricing structure is based on a few things. One is the time and distance rate, which is published on the website.
The same distance, maybe a different time.
Right, exactly. Well, I'll get to that point in a second. On surge or dynamic pricing, which our colleagues at Lyft have in their form of prime time is what they refer to it for surge. One of the ways that TNC services stay really affordable and really cheap, and one reason why Mothers Against Drunk Driving and other organizations have come forward and strongly supported TNC services, is that we're able to keep rates low. In keeping with supply and demand, as any driver in here can tell you, if there is a huge demand for drivers out there, then the price does increase in order to, with market principles, create an incentive for more drivers to get out there and make money. So if you're a driver and you begin receiving notifications that there is a surplus of people requesting a ride, then that surge price is what gets more drivers on the road. So that's the same thing that, on the one hand, increases rates at one time, otherwise is able to keep things really low by equalizing with what the market can take. But that is not, surge pricing is not touched by these sections.
Well, I'm just trying to relate the pricing structure, because what I'm hearing is it's okay to charge more to come home, because you have less cars in the area versus putting out a call to other cars and saying, hey, we're getting demand in this area, please head over there so that you can be in that area and pick up a call. For the same price that I paid to go down there.
Our pricing structure varies between availability. To your point on putting out a call for drivers to come meet demand, that's exactly what's done, and there's a monetary incentive to that, and that's what surge.
Why, in the meantime, though, is the customer charged more to come home?
Not necessarily to come home. I don't quite follow this example.
Well, as I said, from personal contact, people have told me they paid $11 to go downtown for an event, but then when it was over, they were charged somewhere between $30 and $40.
If they encountered a surge, then that was, they could have been at a concert, they could have been in another venue. A driver in here could probably relate any number of stories about surge pricing and how it helps them get good prices. But it varies with supply and demand. That's the same thing that keeps prices very affordable at other times, and sometimes it gets up there. But what that means is that...
But you're not always then
for your
providing cheap
constituents-
services. You are providing, or cheap prices, you are providing a service, but then the pricing can exceed the normal pricing.
The pricing by any study that's been done by any economist who looks at transportation network companies will show that on average, TNC rides are far more affordable than are by other
One half of the way.
transportation purposes. No, for the majority of the time. I'll say that when there's a surge happens and the market equalizes and goes
Okay,
back. But
I
sir,
got it.
I would submit to
Now,
you that...
in a conversation we had earlier on the rate from the airport to the city of New Orleans, which has, we're not going to debate whether the jurisdiction that they have in the city of Kenner is applicable, but they do have a rate of $33. The city of Kenner has had a standing rate of $36 plus the 15 per additional passengers. If I recall, when I was asking you that question, if it was not the $36 but the $33, would you still be able to operate?
There's a question, again, and I know you don't want to raise the jurisdictional question here, but as a company that is making the choice about where we can and cannot operate, if there is one jurisdiction that promulgates one set of rules and another jurisdiction that promulgates another set of rules, we have a very serious question on our hands to say which set of rules are we going to follow. I mean, that's a very real business, very real legal system.
Would the rules of the jurisdiction that you're operating in be more applicable?
That again gets to profound jurisdictional points.
Okay.
It's a big question.
Well, and part of this is heading to is
That's why we are
because
pushing back on this.
I'm not sure if there was some discussion that if the $36 was changed to $33, then you would be okay, because then the price would be the same.
In that case, the two provisions would be in line with each other, so that takes away the uncertainty, but it would still have the issue of the $15 additive charge for a third passenger, and it would still have the issue of rates prescribed from different locations in Kenner to the airport, which would still represent.
So how does the argument
be able to
that
move forward.
if you had to pay the 36 plus the 15, which is in our statutes right now, and what, as the taxi drivers have indicated they're charging, how does that cost more to people coming into the airport?
If I don't fully follow that line, but let's say for a second that the ordinance as drafted now were to be followed. If it were to be followed, that would mean that for a third passenger in an Uber, there would be a $15 surcharge plus the additive $3 here. So prices are going to go up. It means that your constituents would be paying more money than they're paying right now. But for the sake of argument, let's
Well, 2
backtrack
years ago,
for a second,
before you
because
came
there still is a
in-
question of jurisdiction about which set of rules being promulgated would need to be followed. And that,
Okay.
I recognize you don't want to deal with that right now, but for us, that's a very serious question.
Well,
And that's why, I would again implore the body to halt tonight rather than moving forward on this question, because as drafted right now, our company is not going to be able to operate under it.
Again, I keep trying to not berate this, but y'all have been operating here maybe 2-3 years at the most? 1 year, 2 years? What? Less than a year? Okay. Well, then, less than a year ago, when it was only the taxi cabs, and they were charging $36 plus 15 a person, how is that now costing more if we say you have to charge the same rate? Because you weren't operating then. So the folks that came in town were taking taxis, not your entity. So how is it now that they would be paying more?
Councilman, currently, people are paying,
Precisely.
well, more than one person could be in a car, obviously, but up to 4 people are in a car for $33. And so that's saving travelers money. Right now, you're saying that same car should be charging $36. And then for the third person, we're going to tack on another $15. Simple arithmetic, 1,000 cars a day, 365 days a year, just the $3 is over $1 million a year out of travelers' pockets that are coming to New Orleans. And I don't think that can be disputed. Now, we can
No.
add the $15 for additional travelers, but it's certainly an increase on the travelers heading to New Orleans. And I think, more importantly, this sends a message. I think we have to walk very cautiously here to the entire country and the world. We have direct flights to Frankfurt, to London, to Panama, that we don't want for a traveler coming to New Orleans or to the greater New Orleans area. You're not going to be able to use Uber to get to the airport. And that's becoming...
Well, that's not our intent. That's a decision that they're making, but I still haven't rationalized, as we've talked, how is that rate, because it's $36 or $15 additional dollars for a passenger, that they would, when they were not here, not in business over a year ago, that was being charged to every passenger that came through the airport that took a taxi, how is that an increase? Now, I understand you just changed it and said it's a savings.
I wouldn't even classify it as a savings. Right now, people are paying $33. Under this ordinance, in 6 months, they'd have to pay $36. I don't see how that could be seen as anything but a
Well,
additional...
you heard me ask the taxis what they're charging, and they said they're charging $36.
Sure.
So how does there,
passenger
is there some
today-
differentiation
A passenger
differentiation that
that's
says?
traveling today from the airport to New Orleans would pay $33 in a TNC. In 6 months and 1 day, that person would pay $36. That's an increase.
And there would also be the $15 fee for a third passenger, and there would also be differing rates from different
Okay,
different
well,
positions to Kenner
well,
to and
then
from the
I
airport.
was going to propose an amendment to change it from 36 to 33, but I,
The airport would welcome the amendment from 36 to 33.
That's
I think
my
it makes- Councilman, I think, look, we agree. An amendment to 33 makes a lot of sense, takes away this...
but he's still not saying he'll stay in town.
But those are issues within Kenner that I think
Am
we
I hear
should
that
take
correct?
the issues we can all agree on off the table by you proposing your amendment. So I think it's smart to propose.
Councilmember, if the amendment is $33 down from 36, and as well as addressing the issue of rates being prescribed within the vicinity of Kenner and the $15, then yes, that solves that problem. But that issue was already brought up earlier tonight and was voted down when that amendment was brought
No,
up.
it was
So that-
voted
that
down to remove it completely.
That's correct, but that's
So
what would
it's a
need-
different discussion now.
Well, I think, look, I always like to agree with people where we can agree, and then we can work.
Sure, and that's why I thought we had some agreement that I indicated I would try to move the 36 to the 33, but then his answer was, we're going to pull out either way.
No, Councilmember, my answer is that the $36 would need to move to 33, the $15 per third person would need to be struck, and then the rates that are prescribed, the taxi rates from different areas in Kenner to and from the airport, that would need to be addressed as well.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I have a question
Yes,
for the
yes,
Uber
Councilman.
interests. It's my understanding that there's no set rates when the TNC Uber picks up at the airport and delivers to New Orleans. Is that correct?
No, it's a minimum fare of $33.
Okay. But you didn't have that before tonight, is that correct?
That's existed since New Orleans did its ordinance and since an arrangement was reached with MSY Airport. That has been in existence for some time now.
Okay. And the fares that Uber charges can go up or down depending on the amount of traffic, the availability of their drivers, and, how busy we are from the tourist standpoint, correct?
That's correct.
So,
But
in
but
one
but at the
direction,
airport, that is not applicable.
yeah, in one direction, if you pick up in Kenner somewhere besides the airport, you may pay one fare down to New Orleans or somewhere else in Metairie or whatever, and then on the way back, you may charge a higher fee. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So, depending on the supply and demand of the drivers and the tourists, et cetera, the fares go up and down, right?
It's a Exactly, it's a supply and
Right.
demand curve. But that is not, again, applicable to the airport. That is not the case at MSY.
Okay. And the city of Kenner, if this ordinance passes, will charge the TNCs 50 cents per pickup. Is that correct?
For any pickup in the city of Kenner, yes.
Correct. And the airport authority charges the TNCs $4 per pickup. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. For the airport, yes.
Okay, so the city of Kenner's charging 1/8 of what the airport authority charges, and you don't have any problems with the 50 cents. Is that correct?
50 cents is consistent with Jefferson Parish and with Orleans Parish. However, I will say that 50 cents in and of itself is actually the highest per ride fee in the country.
Okay. And it's consistent with Orleans and Jefferson parishes?
Yes, those two parishes have a 50-cent per ride fee, yes.
Okay. And you agree that your drivers should be competent and experienced, correct?
Yes, they have a Louisiana driver's license. They've met the requirements.
And they should be healthy, with no dreaded type diseases that would affect their driving ability, right? You agree with that?
I don't follow this line of questioning, Councilmember.
Okay, what don't you understand about that? The question is, in a statement I'm making to you, is that you would expect your drivers and want your drivers to be healthy.
I believe drivers should be safe behind the wheel, yes.
Okay. And you would agree that Uber wants to do background checks on their drivers, criminal background checks, et cetera, in order to make sure they have a competent, experienced, and safe drivers, correct?
Our drivers are subject to nationally accredited third-party background checks that have been signed off on by the former director of the Secret Service and the former Attorney General of the United States. We're resolutely committed to that point.
Okay. And you would agree that from time to time that your drivers should be drug tested?
That is the requirement in Orleans and in Jefferson.
Okay. And hopefully, after today, it'll be a requirement in the city of Kenner. Right now, it's fair to tell everybody watching tonight that Uber's been operating in the city of Kenner without background checks.
No, that's not correct.
That's not true?
That's not true.
The company did the background checks, right?
Our company has been operating here the same way that we operate in Orleans and Jefferson with drivers subject to the same rules as those jurisdictions.
Okay, so whether we pass this legislation or not, you do the background checks on your drivers, correct?
Every rideshare driver in the country receives that, yes, sir.
Right, and you want safe, competent, and experienced drivers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you do drug tests right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So us passing this ordinance is not really any change in the fact that you do background checks and you're going to do the drug tests, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, if I can then, I would hope to maybe introduce another amendment that we change the rate for our New Orleans, or from the airport to New Orleans, from $36 to $33. To keep that rate in line with what is presently assigned by the New Orleans Council here in Kenner. We'll discuss later, perhaps, where we want to go. But I would like to make a motion that if we change the rate from $36 on our books to $33 to meet what is already being charged.
Thank you, Councilmember. I believe
Understand, sure.
we believe that that's an improvement into the ordinance. It
Okay,
still keeps
well-
up the $15 and the rates within Kenner.
I think he's excluding.
Okay.
Point of clarification. Do I have a second to
Yes.
Councilman Segur's amendment?
All right, now we can discuss it.
Motion by Councilmember Segur, second by Councilmember Klein, to reduce the rate to $33.
Right.
Now you can continue with your
Now we can
discussion.
continue discussion.
Council, just one question on that, and that does not include a passenger increase. If they had more than 2 passengers, they don't have to charge the $15, correct?
At this time, we'll take it in steps. Right? It still includes the extra passenger costs, but let's take it in steps.
Meaning we're going to offer another amendment tonight, or you want to continue?
We'll see. I'm trying to get mine passed right
I
now.
appreciate you trying to avoid this conflict, and I think it's a big step. I think if we're going to avoid the conflict with the airport on TNC rates, let's remove the extra 3-person.
But if I don't do it tonight and we say we'll do it later, then he'll be gone.
No, everyone's going to continue to work.
Okay, well then that's fine. If he says that,
Not
then
going
I'm
anywhere in
okay.
6 months. I'm just nervous that we are sending a message to the country, and he said this publicly, that Uber cannot operate under the current ordinance as issued. And we have 11 million passengers coming in to the airport every year, 12 million to the greater New Orleans region. And the message is that the company that many of those travelers want to use isn't accepted here?
That is nowhere near what's been said, Zach, and we've had that discussion over and over. We're just trying to meet our obligations, but here we are on a topic of fares that seems to be a division, and I was hoping to maybe answer the issue of they would not leave if the fare was changed to what they said would be a consistent fare. That's all.
Okay.
My point is only, Councilman, that it's not consistent now because there's still the requirement that they count the number of passengers they have, and they don't have access to that.
Right. In addition to the rates within Kenner going to and from the airport that refer to the taxi meter standards.
Any other discussion?
Can you count the number of people in a car on the app? Is that an eligible thing? You can
We know who the rider is, but beyond
They
that,
don't know how
there
many
could be
people are in
somebody
the
who's a
car.
passenger. It's not reliable.
They know where the person goes after they leave the car.
Right, but they don't know how many
That's-
people are in the car to add the $15 fee.
I appreciate that, but that's not quite true, sir.
Okay.
Let me ask the representative from Uber one other question. I'm going to ask you one other question.
Yes, sir.
Uber and their representatives don't want to put the taxi cab drivers out of work, do you?
No, sir, not at all.
Okay. I don't think the taxi cab drivers, after the representative spoke, want to put Uber drivers out of work. Is that a fair statement?
I believe so, sir.
All right. And other municipalities around the country, in fact, 46 states have laws that regulate Uber. Is that correct?
44, yes, sir.
44, I'm sorry. And some of, obviously, cities and municipalities throughout the whole United States. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do you know which states don't regulate them yet?
Louisiana, Alabama, Washington, Oregon, I believe Connecticut.
All right, so us as city councilmen in the mayor's office have taken the first step in Louisiana to regulate Uber. Is that correct?
No, sir. Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, the city of Lafayette, the city of Baton Rouge, and other cities do have municipal ordinances that are already in effect and under which we operate.
Okay. In the state of Louisiana, they were working on a bill to regulate Uber, and so far, it's toward the end of the session, and that bill apparently can't get out of committee, which means it's probably dead for this session, correct?
Sir, it passed with a supermajority in the House. It has been stalled in the Senate.
Right. And the Uber representatives had representatives up in Baton Rouge to get their position known to the state, correct?
Yes, sir, that's me.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I have. I think that's all.
Any more discussion on this amendment going from $36 to $33? Hearing no further discussion on that amendment, could my council members please vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Back to your original ordinance.
Yeah. Council members, please vote. Anybody got any?
I need to close just real quickly. though.
Okay. Councilman
I
Segura, you can close.
I know this has taken some time. We have a clock that's reminding us that it's taken some time. But again, I apologize. But remember, we've said it's taken us over a year to also get to this point, to air this out and get to the point of taking a vote. So with that, I do want to thank everybody that had a part in this, whether it be from the TNC companies, the drivers, our counterparts in the city of New Orleans, the New Orleans Aviation Board, the taxi industry, the shuttles, the limos industries we've met with and got a lot of information. Like I said, I just want to thank everybody that had a part in that, but most importantly, I want to thank our Deputy City Attorney, Mr. Ed Rapier, who has been very diligent in being able to rewrite this legislation, and I don't even know to say how many times he has rewritten it as we have discussed over the time period to change words as been brought forth and discussed. So Ed, I do want to thank you very much for your time and effort and your expertise in guiding us on this. I think you did an admirable job, and I just wanted to let you know that. But besides on myself, I'm sure the other council members would feel the same, because they spoke to you on yourself. They spoke to you on their own self with you to get information. So on behalf of that, I do want to thank you. With that, I call for a vote.
Vote on the ordinance as amended.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1. Councilmember Impastato is opposed. Item 9B is a public hearing regarding summary ordinance number 12,249, an ordinance amending ordinance number 11,251 to correct an account number for the 2016-2017 operating budget to reallocate unused funds from the General Municipal Department to the Code Enforcement Department.
Okay. Motion by Councilman Segura, seconded by Councilmember Impastato. Before you leave? I got you.
Mr. Chairman, could we please ask if someone has signed in, if they could remove their name from the list as they're leaving the chambers? That would avoid a lot of confusion at the end of our meeting.
Yes, okay.
If anyone has signed in to speak that is leaving the chambers, could you please remove your name from the list so that we don't call your name at the end of the meeting? Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna go to the restroom.
Okay, no problem. We'll wait a few minutes. He's taking a 2-minute break. Yes. Yes, and you can print it. My goodness gracious, but make sure you put Impastato opposed.
Maybe he thought that too.
Hey, Keith? 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 almost make somebody
Let's call the meeting back to order.
Item 9B is a public hearing regarding summary ordinance number 12,249, an ordinance amending ordinance number 11,251 to correct an account number for the 2016-2017 operating budget to reallocate unused funds from the General Municipal Department to the Code Enforcement Department.
Okay, motion by Councilman Segura, seconded by Councilman Impostata to open a public hearing.
Council members, please vote.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0 to open your hearing.
Is there anyone in the audience which wishes to address the council on this matter? Seeing no one. Motion closed. Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. I have a motion by Councilmember Segura, second by Councilmember Impastato to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 10 is opening of bids. We have none. Item 11 is reclassification of zoning for final passage. We have none. Item 12 is other ordinances for final passage. We have none. Item 13 is resolutions and motions by council members. Item 13A is a resolution selecting the Times-Picayune as the official journal for the city of Kenner for the fiscal year of 2017 and 2018.
Motion by Councilmember Klein, seconded by Councilmember Wilmot. Council members, please vote.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 13B is a resolution urging Governor John Bell Edwards to include priority infrastructure projects in the city of Kenner for submittal to President Trump's transition team by the National Governors Association for potential inclusion in a construction program which projects are of regional significance, are based upon the state of Louisiana, Jefferson Parish, the city of Kenner, and the United States Army Corps of Engineers' ability to deliver the projects within the requested time frame, and 1, meet a national security need for public safety emergency. Number 2, are on the path to shovel-ready. Number 3, have at least 30% of initial design and engineering work completed. And number 4, serve as a meaningful direct job creator. And number 5, enhance the global competitiveness of the domestic manufacturing market.
Motion by Councilmember Impastato, seconded by Councilmember Segura. Anyone wishing to address the council? Mr. Morello?
Al Morello, 4260 East Loyola Drive, 5th District, 45 years. I support this resolution, but I would like to mention this to the council. I'd like to see another resolution drafted similar to this one. Most of you may have heard or you might know that the Gulf of Mexico Energy Securities Act, where our delegation in Washington, D.C., about 3 years ago, secured 37.5% of oil and gas royalties produced off our coast. And the previous administration in Washington signed off on it and agreed to it. Then they turned around and reneged on what they agreed to. The new administration in Washington, D.C. is trying to keep the money from coming to us as well. So they picking up where the previous administration left off. So I've already mentioned this to the Jefferson Parish Council, but I would like to see a resolution urging our delegation in Washington, D.C. not to vote on any budget that does not include the 37.5%, which was promised to us by the previous administration, and now they're trying to take it away. Anybody got any comments, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Council members, please vote. Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 14 is items removed from the consent agenda. We have none. Item 15 is acceptance of contracts and similar matters approved by the mayor. Item 15A is summary ordinance number 12,239. An ordinance approving amendment number 1 to the resident inspection agreement with Linfield, Hunter, and Junius Incorporated dated June 9, 2015 for the wastewater treatment plant number 3 improvements project, which increases the not-to-exceed contract amount from $300,000 to $360,000.
Okay, motion by Councilmember DeFrancis, seconded by Councilmember Wilmot. Council members, please vote. Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 15B is summary ordinance number 12,243, an ordinance authorizing the administration to utilize the existing state contract with Interstate Electronic Systems for the installation of equipment to upgrade the voting system presently in the council chambers in an amount not to exceed $120,000. Mr. Chairman, we've received a request for a one-meeting deferral.
Council members, please vote. Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 15C, summary ordinance number 12,244, an ordinance accepting the lowest response bid received from Han Enterprises Incorporated in the amount of $51,017 to furnish and install new Little Tykes playground equipment or equal and no-fault pour-in-place safety surface or equal at Alabama Playground in accordance with seal bid number 17-6397 for the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Motion by Councilmember Reynaud, seconded by Councilmember Carroll. Yes, Councilman Reynaud, you got the floor.
Mr. Maricoli. This is to replace all of the equipment on that lot, on that playground area, and a new surface, correct?
Correct. This is the design that you approved.
Okay. And we talked about adding some trees and some additional landscaping. That's going to be covered. I know it's not covered in this, but the Recreation Department's going to handle that at the same time, correct?
We'll work on, yes.
Okay. All right. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Council members, please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 15D, summary ordinance number 12,245, an ordinance accepting the responsive bid received from Gator Masonry LLC in the amount of $8,900 to furnish and install a CMU block wall for the backstop at Musbertolino Playground in accordance with letter bid number 17-1559 for the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Klein, seconded by Councilmember DeFrancis. Anyone wishing to speak? Okay. Council members, please vote.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 15E, summary ordinance number 12,246, an ordinance accepting the responsive base bid received from TL Hawk LLC in the amount of $1,991.40 for the demolition of the wastewater treatment plant number 2 project in accordance with seal bid number 17-6395 for the Department of Public Works.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Klein, seconded by Councilmember Impastato.
Councilmember DeFrances, would you like to speak?
Just for a moment. Mr. Dutt, there was some question when we were having our meeting with the mayor as to exactly which, this is plant number 2, and I think some people weren't sure exactly where that was located. Would you mind putting it on the record for everyone?
Sure. The wastewater treatment plant number 2 is located
off of Chateau Boulevard behind the Chateau Country Club.
Okay, and the reason they raised that question was because of the fact that in 15A, we had plant number 3, so there was some confusion for a lot of people exactly which was which. Thank you.
Okay. And, Mr. Dote, this has been an eyesore for a long, long time. Is that correct? It's finally going to be torn down, and hopefully we can put that area back into commerce. Is that all on schedule?
Yes, sir, the project is on schedule and should be moving forward pretty quickly.
Okay, and when do you think it will be completed?
I think there's probably about a 6-month project period, so they still have some preliminary matters that they're going through at this point, so probably 6 months, 8 months going forward, they should be able to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilman, the mayor would like to speak.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
And just for further clarification, Councilman DeFrancis, you're right. Plant number 3 is actually improvements. Plant number 2 is demolition, which is the one I talked about early, but we had the discussion early and we wanted to get clarification. So, like I said, the eyesore will come down with passage of this. Oh, no, it absolutely, no, I'm agreeing with you.
No, I know you
Yeah.
are. May I add something to the mayor's, because I think he's absolutely on target with all of this. He knows all the problems we had out there, from children being locked in some of the buildings, where we had children going in and turning on the water spigots, so we had geysers. So he has been very, very proactive in working with Councilman Klein and myself to address those potential, not only eyesores, but also dangerous situations that existed, and moving forward as quickly as possible. So I wanted to thank you for that.
And Councilman Wilmot, like I mentioned earlier, has been very instrumental in getting this done. I mean, this is an issue for myself, you three, and the chief, making sure that this is addressed. So the whole council addressing this, I appreciate.
Absolutely.
Thank you for all your help, Mr. Mayor.
Council members, please vote.
Please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 15F is summary ordinance number 12,247, an ordinance approving an agreement with law offices of Regino Scotto Wedig LLC to provide legal services for the city of Kenner in an amount not to exceed $150,000 annually.
Motion by Councilmember Segura, seconded by Councilmember Klein.
I thought we were going to change that one to specific. That's what we were told at our meeting.
I can
We were gonna change it
address
to the
that, Councilman
specific-
DeFrancis.
Specific
I
contracts
have a
that
motion by
already existed.
Councilmember Segura, second by Councilmember Klein, to
Again.
put the ordinance on the floor. Councilman DeFrancis, would you like to speak?
Yes, I do have a question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go
I
ahead.
can answer it.
Thank
What
you.
is your
Do
question?
you understand my question?
I didn't hear it.
I apologize for that. When we had our meeting, my understanding was, because there was some confusion, that this attorney has already been working on specific legislation. I believe 3 different projects, or maybe more. I know of at least 3.
Litigation.
And we wanted to make sure that she continued to work on those projects, because obviously, if we had to start with a new attorney, it would cost the city and the constituents quite a bit more money to start from ground zero again. But I just wanted to make sure, because there was some confusion, that this particular ordinance specifies that she's going to continue to work on those projects on which she's already been working, not necessarily on new projects. Am I correct?
Well, not the legislation, Councilwoman DeFrances, but the contract actually spells out or lists the scope of work, and there's 6 lawsuits that she's currently handling. So it's not necessary to amend the legislation. The contract provides for a limited scope of work.
But I just wanted to put that on the record, because I think there was some confusions. I think some people, maybe in the audience, think that we're just hiring her, to do some new work up to that amount. So I thought it was important to make that stipulation. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Councilman Reno, you have the floor.
Ms. Roussel,
Sir.
did they, this original contract was with a different firm, and that partner retired, or what? Can you just
That's right.
clarify that for the record?
The original contract and these lawsuits were handled by Al Bordelon. Regina Wedig was associated with Mr. Bordelon and his firm, and Mr. Bordelon has since retired. So we are authorizing a contract with Ms. Wedig, who has been basically the lead counsel on these cases.
So that's what necessitated,
That's correct.
doing this. I just wanted to clarify that for the record so that the public would know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ms. Roussel.
You're welcome.
Council members, please vote.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, no problem. Motion passes 6-0. Councilmember Carroll is abstaining. Item 15G is summary ordinance number 12,248, an ordinance authorizing an agreement with New Era Information Technologies, the LLC, to provide for the expansion, maintenance, and repair of the security access and video management system in an amount not to exceed $250,000 for the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications. Mr. Chairman, we've also received a request to remove this item from the agenda this evening as per the administration.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Impastato, seconded by Councilmember Klein to remove this item from the agenda.
Council members, please vote.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 15H is a resolution approving change order number 1, final to the contract with Hard Rock Construction LLC, dated June 28, 2016, regarding the Williams Boulevard Vintage Drive roadway drainage and enhancement improvements west side of Williams for a net decrease of $5,417.40 for the contract amount, resulting in a total contract amount of $951,692.60, and to accept the contract as complete for the Department of Public Works.
Okay, motion by Councilmember, oh, I'm sorry, sure.
We're always delighted with council members can vote for something that's actually just wanted to put it out there. We're delighted to be able to do that.
All right, thank you. Motion by Councilmember Reynaud, seconded by Councilmember Klein. Council members, please vote.
Oh, wait.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. Item 16 is ordinances and resolutions in summary for first reading. Item 16A is an ordinance adopting the capital budget for the City of Kenner for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2017, and ending June 30th, 2018. Item 16B is an ordinance authorizing the purchase and installation of a high-definition jail surveillance system in the amount of $37,895 utilized in the State of Louisiana contract number 4400011241 with LA Tech LLC for the Kenner Police Department. Item 16C is an ordinance accepting the lowest responsive bid from Barrier Construction Company, LLC, received on April 11, 2017, by the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development in the amount of $695,577.88 for the Chateau Boulevard resurfacing state project number H.011007, federal aid project number H.011007, Kenner Public Works number 2014-007-RB. 16D is an ordinance ratifying the proposal from Berkeley Insurance Company with an AM Best rating of A+ Superior 15 for commercial package liability insurance for the period of July 1st, 2017 through July 1st, 2018. Item 16E is an ordinance ratifying the proposal from Safety National Casualty Company with an AM Best rating of an excellent for excess workers' compensation insurance for the period of July 1st, 2017 through July 1st, 2018. Item 16F is an ordinance authorizing repairs to Case 321E Loader Unit 2004 by Lee Tractor Company, an authorized dealer, in the amount of $17,594.73 for the Department of Fleet Management. Item 16G is an ordinance amending the 2016-17 operating budget to reallocate unused funds from the council office budget to the council chamber upgrade project account. Item 17 is reports from the council and or special committees. Councilman Segura, you have something?
I'd like to, and Council President and committee chairman of the committee he formed to review the boat issue, if I may take the opportunity to comment that the committee met this past Monday morning, and that the initial agenda item for that meeting was to set up future meeting dates that will be published throughout the city on as many legal as well as social media means that we can, to ensure that everybody is aware of the future meetings that we will be having on gathering information like we just did with the Chapter 16 issue. We have already started contacting civic associations, civic groups, and getting dates of their meetings so that we can meet with them during their meetings. So just letting you know that this committee is very active and moving forward on, hopefully at the conclusion, come up with a compromise to the issue of the UDC current law restricting boats and driveways, and that at some point at the conclusion of this fact gathering, then we hope to present some form of discussion in the form of a legislation. Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Impastato, you have the floor.
Yes.
Natalie.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead. Sorry.
At the last meeting, a question was asked about Jefferson Parish's adoption of the new FEMA flood maps, and I indicated that I'd asked the Jefferson Parish floodplain manager to appear at the next council meeting, which would be tonight, to give a presentation about the status of that. I guess luckily she wasn't available, so we didn't extend this meeting any longer. But in any event, I was able to, I met with her when she told me she couldn't make it, to get information from her, which she gave a timeline that's readily available on the Jefferson Parish government website. I'm not sure if we have it posted on ours, but I'm going to ask the administration to review it and make it available on ours. But basically what it says is Jefferson Parish has adopted the revised FEMA flood map, okay? That was done. It has been submitted to FEMA based on public comments and all of that. What we are waiting on, and I say we, Jefferson Parish government is the one that is in control of this, handling all of this, not the city of Kenner in any way whatsoever. But it is under FEMA's quality control review, and it is expected that somewhere around August of this year, they will issue a letter of final determination, which would then render, 6 months from that time, would render those flood maps effective. So, and whether that would or wouldn't affect the rates would depend on where people fit. But this, I have it with me. I think anyone who was here for that already left. But if not, I have copies of the timeline they gave us. And I'll ask that if the administration's willing, if this could be something we post on our website as a frequently asked question or something to that effect, so people have access to that information. So, thank you.
Councilman Seguro?
Piggyback on Councilman Impastato's report. As you may recall, I was trying to answer the gentleman's question on his insurance rates and when this would take effect and how it would affect his rates. And I spoke up to say that from what I understood, that once it's put in place, then his rates will be adjusted. I received several phone calls after that from well-respected insurance agents who assured me that it's an automatic process. So I just wanted to, anybody, maybe another insurance agent, tell me differently, but from these insurance agents who called in response to my comments said that it will be an automatic change in their rates. Thank you.
If I may just interject, Councilman Impastato, there is a link currently on the Kenner City website. In fact, starting today, the start of hurricane season, there's a new section called Hurricane Preparedness on the homepage. If you click on Hurricane Preparedness and a section that says Stay Informed, it'll take you to an item that says Flood Maps. Click on that and it'll take you directly to the link.
Great, well, perfect.
Yes, sir.
And that has the timeline on it?
It has what's next on it's the Jefferson Parish portion, and it says what's next on the path, revised preliminary maps issued. So you can, it's a couple of steps that you have to take once you get there, but it'll kind of walk you through it.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
Item 18 is new business. We have none. Item 19 is unfinished business and/or motions to reconsider or remove from the tabled position. We have none. Item 20 is persons wishing to address the council on special subject matters.
Okay, we have some people. Okay. Okay, Al Morella?
Al Morella, 4260 East Loyola Drive, 5th District, 45 years. I want to respond to some comments that was made in here at the May 4th meeting. First, I want to direct these comments to the chief. Law enforcement all around this country encourages citizens to, if you see something, say something. And for the chief to criticize me for doing that, me or any other citizen in this city, I find disgraceful, not only to the people of Kenner, but to the department and to the office as well. As far as the comments that he made about me seeking attention or stirring people up in the neighborhood, well, let me tell you what's stirring the people up in the neighborhoods and what has got their attention. 2 lawsuits either been filed or going to be filed against our police department, especially the one that may be as much as $8.5 million. Now, I want to direct these next comments to you, Councilman Segura. No one accused you of anything or the Waffle House. You incriminated yourself when you singled yourself out and went on the defensive. I hope you never have to go into court of law and stand trial for anything, because you would be a prosecutor's dream come true. Now, I want to direct this to you, Councilman Reno. I couldn't agree with you more on May 4th when your comments concerning taxpaying citizens in this city coming up to this podium and exercising their First Amendment right to freedom of speech. Direct this to you, Councilman Wilmot. At the last council meeting, you suggested that this council look at some procedures in Baton Rouge when conducting their committee hearings up there. Let me suggest this to you, Councilman Wilmot. Maybe you need to familiarize yourself with RS 427, because otherwise there could be some serious consequences for this council. Anybody got any comments, any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morello. Oh, sorry, Councilman Segura does.
It's just, I hate to do that. No, you finished. I just got a comment after you finished.
Oh, okay.
Is that in reference to that, I'm happy or disappointed, and for your sake, to say that over my 33-plus years of law enforcement, I have spent many hours testifying, and I can assure you that that testimony has led to the conviction of many, many, many people who are still in jail as a result. So I don't know if that makes a prosecutor happy, a defense attorney happy, but it made the prosecutors happy. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Segura. Donna Reno, wife of Keith Reno, Councilman.
Good evening, Donna Reno, 42 Emile Avenue. Just wanted to come and say after the last meeting that I'm going to return to these meetings, as I said before, because every minute of our day is watched, scrutinized, photographed when possible, and we're followed and more. My intention in coming to these meetings is to show how some administrative employees of Kenner's, though dysfunctional as it really is, and those Mr. Zahn tries to imply otherwise, are involved in activities that are disrespectful to a Kenner elected official. This should not be the case. I came today to tell you that the veiled, slanderous, libel, malicious attacks on my family, and especially and including our smallest member, and to my son who's mentally ill with schizophrenia, to a previous stepchild with disabilities, with false accusation of financial problems, marital problems, being into heavy drugs, alcohol problems, false accusations of assault, false police reports filed, and so much more. Though I have proof with audio and video and pictures, which I had not been asked for to share with any of the other 6 council members or the mayor or the detectives that I guess you'd say investigated the 2 allegations. I have the right to come here as a resident of Kenner, though it's not required, and I can speak whether my spouse is on the council or not. and the city cannot impede my freedom of speech, though most of you might prefer to. It is unconstitutional. Just because you don't like me or me coming here and speaking the truth, I will defend myself and my family. And finally, I do not think it is right that Mr. Bohannon would come here to mock my God in an effort to mock my husband's religious beliefs. It is his right to do so. To me, it shows his character, and I will keep returning as long as I need to show the vindictiveness and the type of politics, Mr. Zahn, and also your representatives, in which some are in this audience. Thank you.
Fred Miller? He's gone? Okay.
Oh.
Mayor Zahn, you have the floor.
Again, just, the comments are getting worse. And, I'm going to speak for the whole administration, my employees. Dysfunctional is a terrible word, because I guarantee if we poll the city right now, it's not seen as dysfunctional. There may be some people that are seen as dysfunctional, but if you poll what this administration, along with some council members have done, and our chief is doing, I don't think anything here is dysfunctional except the comments that are being allowed to be made. So I take offense to dysfunctional administration. If this administration is dysfunctional, Councilman Reno continues to call on this administration. So I don't think our response from a so-called dysfunctional administration is dysfunctional when you call on us. Would you agree to that? Okay, so we've been down this road before where if you had an issue, or if the administration had an issue with you, or you had an issue with the administration, you weren't allowed to speak to employees. If you think that this administration is dysfunctional, maybe you and I need to have a certain meeting just between us to make sure where we need to go. I disagree, but I'm asking the councilman, not you. I'm asking. You've asked to talk about a dysfunctional administration? Did I send you a letter recently?
She has her opinions on stuff, I have my opinions. But
Did I send you a letter recently that you were responding to me to ask me to respond to you? I'm not aware of what you're.
I haven't received, I'll be more than happy to meet with you at any time.
No, I'm just asking for the record. You want to say that you have reached out to me about a dysfunctional administration. I don't believe I've received that.
Did I say anything about this?
I'm talking about dysfunctional administration. You went about a communication you sent out to me. Did you send me something about a dysfunctional administration in your letter?
I sent you a letter asking for help with a complaint, and I have gotten no.
A complaint about the administration?
And
I'm asking a question.
it's regarding the administration.
It is?
And I have asked, the second time, a letter went out today, asking you for a response to my first letter.
Why don't you just go ahead and share what the letter request is? Because it's not about a dysfunctional administration. I keep asking that question. Why don't you, if you sent me to public records, because it's public record, why don't you go ahead and say what you sent me?
I don't have the letter in front of me.
So you don't know what the content of the letter was?
What the content of the letter.
Well, share it with the public.
I'm not prepared to share it right now, but I'll be more than happy to share it at the next council meeting.
No, that's quite fine, because it's just for the record, just so the people of Kenner know, it's not about an administration issue.
It isn't in.
No, it's not. But if you're so prepared with the two letters you've sent me, you probably know the content of it, go ahead and share it with the public.
Mayor Zahn, I just explained to you that I'd be more than happy to share it at the next council meeting. I don't have the letter right in front of me, and I can't quote, I didn't memorize the letter, I can't quote it verbatim, but I'll be more than happy to share that. But I've asked for you to meet with me privately. I've asked
About my administration?
about a situation with the administration.
It's not about the administration. Look forward to the next council meeting when you share that it's not about the administration.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Next speaker, I can't read your last name, but it's Tim. They must be gone.
Begins with an A?
Yes,
He's gone.
he's gone, okay. And then Mr. Salim, S-E-L-I-M, he must be gone. Fred Miller's gone.
They only stayed for the.
Don, it looks like it starts with a D. Gone. Mr. Byron. Qmott, he's gone. Darlene, her last name is S-W-E-I-G-A-R-T, gone. AJ, gone. Last one is Craig Delat.
Wait, hold up.
No,
Somebody stood up.
okay.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, allowing me to speak. My name's Craig Little, 233 North College, Lafayette,
can't hear you.
Louisiana. Craig Little, 233 North College Road, Lafayette, Louisiana, 70506. I do live in Lafayette now. I'm originally from Metairie, grew up here my whole life, familiar with everybody. I have a law practice in Lafayette. We want to open up here in Kenner. The irony is, tonight I heard everybody complaining about having a occupational license. I actually applied for one, want one, and waiting for my license. So I think that's a good thing. However, I'm here. I understand, Mr. Reno, maybe there's some issues with 1107 Williams Boulevard where my office is going to go. I would like, if there's any issues involved, I'd like to hear it, and I would appreciate any comments that you have. I do know that when you ran for mayor of Kenner, you based your campaign on economic development and blight. And one thing I want to say is my landlord is A.J. Sotomayor. And I got to tell you, if you're talking about blight and you look at 1107 Williams Boulevard, it's night and day compared to the way it was. He took a piece of property at Nolomax, fixed it up, made it nice. He took the building that was an old house, fixed that up. It's a very impressive office to have clients come in. And I'm excited to be in Kenner. I'm excited to open up. I want to get started, but if there's any issues with the zoning or anything, I would appreciate feedback on that. And I want to thank Lee, the mayor, for their help. And I got to tell you the reason why I came. I grew up in Metairie my whole life. AJ and Lee both impressed upon me the opportunities of opening up a business in Kenner. So I'm excited to be here, but if you have any feedback on the problems with the zoning or anything, I'd appreciate that because I would like to get started and start operating.
Councilman Reynaud, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The issues regarding anything to do with code or zoning or whatever on that property were brought up by a gentleman by the name of George Ferris, who has a business right near there and also has a home in that same area. So that was his issues that he had.
Okay.
So you're addressing that to me. He was the one that brought up those issues, and he's been at this council meeting, and he has stated the issues that he had, okay? And he's also a resident of District 2, and I know he's had conversations with Councilman Segura. So I just want to clarify that.
That's fine. I was just surprised that the neighbor would bring it up because by Mr. Sotomayor developing the properties, he's actually enhanced his property value, so you ought to be really excited.
Well, I would recommend that you contact George Ferris if you want to find out more information. He's the one that came in front of this council.
Okay, thank you
Okay?
for your time.
Thank you.
Excuse me, if I'm next. Okay.
Councilman Segura.
First off, welcome to District 2.
Thank you very much.
Glad to have a new business in Kenner, in my district. Getting that occupational license. Okay, but let me, if I can, I'll kind of answer the question you referenced about any zoning or issues. I don't know that there are any. Mr. Farris approached me last year and explained he had some issues, and when I tried to work them out with him by holding a meeting of all the parties that relative to what his complaint was, he would never come back and meet. So he came to several council meetings and expressed the same concerns. And at the council meeting, and in fact, I don't want to put Mr. Councilman Carroll on the spot, but I recall him telling him, the administration, because I was serving as mayor at the time, is willing to meet with you, meet with them, and they'll answer your questions. He never came back. He never has come back to the council meeting since the election was over. So I don't know to say where his problems really originate from, but I agree that Mr. Sotomayor has done a wonderful job in enhancing the properties next door to Mr. Farris, and certainly, as you said, should increase his property values. And I do welcome the businesses that Mr. Sotomayor is bringing to our area, and with open arms, thank you for coming to District 2 in Kenner.
Thank you, and I'm hoping AJ continues developing the block, too. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the meeting.
Motion to move, to close. Oh, wait a minute. Oh,
Got another speaker?
oh, okay. Come on up. Thought you sat down.
AJ Sotomayor, 126 Chateau Latour, District 4. I own property in all 5 districts. Most of you guys, I know y'all by first name. And for the last month or so, this is actually to you, Keith Raynard. What is the problem that you have with me and my family?
I don't have any problem.
What is the problem with my family?
Have I said anything negative about your family, Mr. Sotomayor?
You clearly say that you're a Christian. Are you?
Yes, sir.
So you're bound that whatever your wife does,
Yeah.
you're part of it.
You have to separate. Each individual is individual.
So you're separate. So do you agree with her comments about my family?
I never said anything about your family.
Do you agree with your wife's comments?
My wife and I don't always agree on everything that we have differences of opinion, just like anybody else.
Okay. You know I'm a very private person, right? I've helped
sorry.
you out before. Haven't I helped you out before?
I don't know what you're talking about, sir.
Do you remember when we were eating lunch? That you came to Janduzas?
Yeah.
Okay.
You sat down and you sat for half hour, and you said what a wonderful job Lee was doing, and if you were elected, that you would keep her.
Yes, sir, I do remember that.
Okay. Do you have a problem with Lee?
I don't have a problem with anybody.
You know I voted for Benzon, right? The mayor?
That's not relevant.
Excuse me?
That's not relevant.
Apparently it is.
Maybe in your mind.
Keith, I want your wife to stop messing with our family.
And have I said any negative comments about you? Has Keith Reno said any negative comments about you?
You're answering things. You send out letters that you're being attacked.
And I am.
We are responding. This is why I'm here. I need you to leave my family alone.
I'm not attacking your family.
So do you agree with her comments or not?
I just told you, everybody has different opinions on matters. Everybody's not the same.
All right, why don't we move on and say, no personal attacks. Let's keep decorum here in order. I'm not saying you're out of order or you're not keeping the proper decorum, but let's move on to something else that you may want.
I would like to also ask you, what is the administration doing to you? You keep on saying the administration is attacking you. Who is attacking you, and bring them out? Call them out. Call them out. Who is it? Can you do that for me?
No, I'm not going to do it anymore.
No?
The chairman just said that this is enough, so we're done.
We're not done.
Well,
I would also like to let the administration know, any employee of the city of Kenner gets harassed by you and they need legal, I will sponsor it. Anyone that gets harassed, mistreated by you, I need you to stop threatening the people.
We just had this conversation. You can't name one time when I threatened you, I threatened anybody. I haven't.
Okay, Keith, I'm asking you to leave the family alone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all we have. Got Richard Brown?
Thank you, Mr. President. Richard Brown. I wanted to make a comment that throughout, it has to do with the Uber ordinance, the TNC debate, ride share, whatever you want to call it. And over the months or year or more that this has been going on, I've heard a lot of comments about whether or not taxis and the rideshare companies have to be on a level playing field or have to be treated the same. Some of you seem to take the position they should be. Some of you take the position they do not have to be. I just wanted to say, and maybe all of y'all are familiar with this, and maybe you're not, and maybe the public's not. The only real court case on this issue, the most important one, the most significant one, is a case from last year out of Chicago in the 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, where the taxi cab industry sued the city of Chicago. Chicago had adopted rideshare regulations that were much more lenient than the taxi cab regulations. The taxi cabs sued Chicago. They lost in the district court. It was appealed to the 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeal. They upheld the lower court's decision. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to review the 7th Circuit decision. To the best of my knowledge, that's the only U.S. Circuit Court division and the decision in the country that speaks to the sole issue of whether taxis and ride shares have to be treated the same. And that decision says clearly, unequivocally, over and over, they are different business models. They do not have to be treated the same. And that Chicago's regulations, which are much more lenient toward the rideshare companies, are appropriate. And I won't take any more time to go into it. I'll be happy to give any of y'all a citation of this case if you want it. I think it maybe has a bearing on what this council is doing. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I'll make the motion again.
Okay, motion to adjourn, secondly?